He survived the trailer park. He survived the streets. But now Jace is in the big leagues, and the price of failure is a shallow grave in the Humboldt Hills. Weed. Chapter 1. The shed in Ukiah had lasted 6 months, 2 harvests, and 1 dead junkie ago. Now Jace was back in Humboldt, renting a different shed behind a different tired-looking house, this one on the outskirts of Fortuna. The landlord was a guy named Sal, who chain-smoked menthols and repaired lawnmowers in his driveway. For $600 a month cash, Sal didn't care what Jace did in the shed, as long as the noise wasn't louder than a dying Briggs and Stratton. Inside, 20 plants were finishing up under 2 600-watt lights. It was a clean, tight setup. Nothing wasted. Jace had just under $10,000 from his last 2 sales, a number that felt both like a fortune and like nothing at all. It was get-by money. It wasn't get-out money. He was trimming the last of the harvest, his fingers sticky and black, when he heard a knock on the shed's metal door. Not a cop's knock. Too soft. He picked up the Smith & Wesson from the table, moved to the side of the door. "Yeah. It's Ellie." The voice was young, a little ragged around the edges. He slid the bolt back and opened the door a crack. She stood there, backlit by the gray afternoon sky. Thin, maybe 19, with stringy blonde hair and the wary, restless eyes of a girl who slept in her car. She was holding a half-empty bag of chips. "Heard you were back in town," she said. "Heard you might have some product." Jace looked past her, scanned the street. A rusty Camaro, a pickup on blocks. No black sedans. No quiet men with patient eyes. "Who'd you hear that from?" "People talk." She shrugged, a small bird-like movement. "I need something for the pain." She nodded at her arm, a fresh track mark near the elbow, an angry red welt. "I'm not selling that kind of pain relief," Jace said. "No, man. The good stuff. Green." She looked past him into the shed, at the hanging branches, the purple glow. "Looks like you got plenty." He studied her for a second. The frayed cuffs of her jean jacket, the hunger in her eyes that wasn't for food. She was a stray. Harmless. A tool, if he needed one. "Wait here," he said. He closed the door, bolted it, and grabbed a small Ziploc bag. He put a couple of grams of trimmed popcorn buds into it, not the premium stuff. He went back to the door and handed it to her. She took the bag, her eyes lighting up. "Shit, man. Thanks. How much?" "It's a gift," Jace said. Her eyes narrowed. She knew nothing was a gift. "What do you want?" "Nothing," Jace said. "Right now." She understood. She nodded. She looked at him, then at the shed, then back at him. "You need anything, a message run, whatever, you know where to find me. I'm usually parked down by the river." She started to leave, then stopped. "You look different," she said. "How?" "Older." She walked away, tucking the bag of weed into her jacket pocket like a secret. Jace watched her go, then closed and bolted the door. He was 20 years old. He felt 100. The meeting was with a man named Ray. Julian Black had set it up, a parting gift for the $50,000 Jace had paid him before the Sacramento crew ran him out of his first real operation. The $50,000 was gone, vaporized with the shack in the hills. Julian had called it a loss. An investment that didn't pan out. He'd kept the money. But he'd made a call. Ray owned a dispensary called the Gilded Leaf on the Arcata Plaza. It wasn't a head shop. It had recessed lighting, polished concrete floors, and glass cases displaying THC-infused seltzers and artisanal edibles. The girl at the front desk looked like a yoga instructor. "I'm here to see Ray," Jace said. "Do you have an appointment?" "He's expecting me." "Jace." She picked up a phone, murmured into it, and then nodded. "He'll be right with you." Ray came out from a back room. He was in his late 30s, wearing a crisp black polo shirt with a small embroidered gold leaf on the chest. He had a friendly, open face, a firm handshake, and the dead calm eyes of a crocodile. "Jace, glad you could make it," he said. "Julian speaks highly of you. Says you're a producer of rare talent." "I grow weed," Jace said. "Some people grow weed," Ray said, leading him into a small, clean office. "Others create art. I've seen your work. It's art." He closed the door. "The problem is, my customers can't buy art that doesn't exist. My supply chain has been unreliable lately." "Vic Torrance?" Jace asked. Ray gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. Vic was a blunt instrument. Effective for a time. But he lacked vision. And now, he's on a permanent vacation. That's created opportunities. And problems. He sat behind a small, neat desk. "I need a reliable supplier. Someone who can deliver consistent quality on a deadline. Julian seems to think you might be that person." "What's the deal?" "The deal is simple." Ray leaned forward, his friendly mask slipping just a little. "I need 50 pounds of premium indoor flour. Grade A, no popcorn, no shake. 50 pounds cured and delivered in 3 months. Jace kept his face blank, but his mind was racing. 50 pounds. From the 20 plants he had now, he'd be lucky to get 4. It was an impossible number. "And if I can do that?" Jace asked. "If you can do that," Ray said, "I will pay you $100,000. Cash." The number hung in the office, shimmering like a heat haze. 100 grand. Get out money. Get gone forever money. "That's a big order," Jace said. "It's a big opportunity." Ray leaned back, the friendly smile returning. "Of course, it's a big risk for me too. I'm putting a lot of faith in a young man with a chaotic reputation. My partners, they get nervous when things are chaotic. They don't like delays. They don't like excuses." "Partners. Everyone has partners," Ray said smoothly. "The point is, the deadline is firm. 3 months. You deliver, you get paid. You fail, well, let's just focus on success, shall we?" Ray stood up. The meeting was over. He walked Jace to the door. "Think about it," Ray said. "You're the kind of artist we want to be in business with. Let me know your decision by the end of the week." Jace walked out of the dispensary into the bright sunlight of the plaza. $100,000. The number was a key. It was the key to a door he hadn't even known existed. But 50 pounds in 3 months, he'd need a bigger spot. A real one. He'd need land, equipment, a crew. He'd need to become the kind of man who could make 50 pounds of weed appear out of thin air. He'd have to become Vic Torrance. Only smarter. Harder. He was thinking about land, about the mountains, when he saw the rusty Camaro parked across the plaza. Ellie was in the driver's seat, watching him. She saw him look, and she didn't look away. She just sat there, waiting. Jace walked back to his shed. The deal was impossible. A setup. Ray's partners, the deadline, the sheer volume, it was a test designed to make him fail. But $100,000 wasn't a test. It was a dare. He got to the shed, unlocked the door. He stopped. The scent of weed was still there, but underneath it was another smell. Cheap perfume and chip dust. Ellie was sitting on an overturned bucket next to his trimming table. She'd jimmied the lock. "How'd you get in?" he asked, his hand going to his hip. "You need a better lock," she said, unfazed. "So, how'd it go with the fancy man?" "What do you want, Ellie?" "I want in," she said. "Whatever it is, I want in. I can do things. Run messages. Find people. Whatever you need." He looked at her, at the raw hunger in her eyes. She wasn't a stray. She was a tool, offering herself up for use. "Take off your clothes," he said. She didn't hesitate. She stood up and pulled her shirt over her head. The encounter was quick, rough, standing up against the wall of the shed. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about confirming the terms of their new arrangement. It was a transaction. When it was over, she pulled her clothes back on. "So," she said, her voice even. "Am I in?" "Go down to the river," Jace said, turning away from her, already thinking about water pumps and irrigation lines. "Find me 3 guys who aren't afraid of hard work and don't talk to cops. Tell them it pays $200 a week. In product." He heard her leave, the metal door clicking shut behind her. He stood alone in the shed, surrounded by the smell of weed and sex and ambition. Ray's deadline was a gun to his head. His partners were ghosts in the machine. And he had 100,000 reasons to pull the trigger himself, first. Chapter 2. The 20 plants in Sal's shed were never going to be enough. 50 pounds in 3 months wasn't farming, it was manufacturing. And a backyard shed wasn't a factory. Jace needed land. Real land. The kind of place you could get lost in. The kind of place where a man's business could grow without streetlights and nosy neighbors. He drove his new truck, a 20-year-old Toyota Tacoma he'd paid $2,000 cash for, its engine rattling like a jar of bolts, up into the mountains east of Willow Creek. The pavement gave out, then the gravel, until he was on a logging road that was slowly being reclaimed by the forest. The air grew thin and cold, smelling of pine and damp earth. This was the heart of the triangle, a green maze that had been swallowing secrets since the first outlaws ran from the law. He was looking for a specific set of features: a south-facing slope for sun, a year-round creek for water, and no easy way in or out. A natural fortress. He found it on the second day of looking. A high meadow, a bowl carved out of the mountainside, hidden from the road below by a thick stand of fir and a ridge of sharp black rock. A creek cut through the middle of it, cold and fast. It was perfect. Big enough for 200 plants, maybe more. Defensible. From the ridge, you could see a car coming for miles. The only problem was the water. It was 30 feet below the level of the meadow. He needed a pump. Hoses. A generator to run it all. He had $7,000 left to his name. A good pump, and the gear to go with it would eat half of that. Money he didn't have. Money he needed for clones, soil, nutrients. But he knew where to get the equipment. There was a grower named Jimmy the Greek Pappas who had a spread about 15 miles away, on the other side of the mountain. Jimmy was old school, but he'd gotten lazy. He hired trimmers who talked too much. Jace had listened to one of them in a bar a few months back, bragging about Jimmy's setup. About the big diesel generator and the new irrigation pump he'd bought, but hadn't installed yet, still sitting in a crate in his supply shed. Jace waited 2 nights. He parked the Tacoma a mile down the road from Jimmy's gate and walked in, the Smith & Wesson a cold weight in his waistband. Jimmy's place was sloppy. The gate was unlocked. No dogs. The supply shed was a big metal building 50 yards from the main house, its lock a cheap master lock you could break with a rock. A single floodlight lit the area between the house and the shed. A man was sitting on a plastic chair by the shed door, smoking a cigarette and looking at his phone. The guard. He was young, maybe 25, with a soft belly hanging over his belt. Jace watched him from the darkness of the tree line. He could wait for the guard to go inside. He could try to sneak past him. But that was leaving it to chance. The $100,000 deal didn't have room for chance. He walked out of the trees, straight toward the guard. The guard looked up from his phone, startled. "Hey. This is private property, man." He stood up, putting his hand on a big mag light on his belt. He was trying to look tough. "I'm looking for Jimmy," Jace said, his voice even. He kept walking. "Jimmy ain't seeing nobody," the guard said, taking a step forward. "You need to turn around and walk on out of here before you get hurt." Jace stopped 5 feet from him. "I don't think you're going to hurt me." The guard puffed out his chest. "Yeah. What makes you say that?" Jace didn't answer. He just drew the Smith & Wesson, the movement smooth and economical. The guard's tough guy act dissolved. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Turn around," Jace said quietly. The guard hesitated. Jace took a step forward and pressed the muzzle of the gun against the soft spot under the man's chin. The guard started shaking. "Please, man," he whispered. I'm just watching the place." "Turn around." The guard turned slowly, his hands raised. Jace reversed the pistol in his hand, gripping the slide. He swung it once, a hard, sharp blow to the base of the guard's skull. The man made a soft grunt and crumpled to the ground, out cold. Jace knelt, checked his pulse. Still breathing. Good. A dead guard was a bigger problem than an unconscious one. He dragged him behind the shed and left him there. The lock on the shed door broke with one solid blow from a rock. Inside, it was a treasure chest. The new pump was still in its crate, just like the trimmer had said. Rolls of black irrigation hose, bags of fertilizer, lights, fans. Jace worked fast, loading the pump and 2 big rolls of hose into the back of Jimmy's own ATV, a new Polaris that was parked next to the shed. He found the keys hanging on a hook inside the door. He drove it right out the front gate, down the road to where he'd parked his truck. It took him 3 trips to get everything he needed. On the last trip, he siphoned gas from Jimmy's truck to fill the ATV's tank. He got back to Fortuna as the sun was coming up. He parked the stolen ATV in a ravine and walked the rest of the way to his shed. He felt good. The job was clean. He had his gear. He was 1 step closer. He found Ellie sleeping in her Camaro, parked in the alley behind Sal's place. He knocked on the window. She woke up with a start, her eyes wild for a second before she recognized him. He handed her a $50 bill and a small, tightly wrapped package of weed through the window. "What's this?" she asked. "A job." He gave her a piece of paper with a name on it. "Danny Boy. There's a dealer who works the bars down by the docks. Everyone knows him. Find him. Give him the package. Tell him it's a gift from the new guy in the hills." "The new guy," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That you?" "Just give him the message," Jace said. "He'll ask who you got it from. Tell him you don't know. Just some kid in a beat-up Toyota truck. Then walk away." "What's the point?" "The point," Jace said, "is that Danny Boy works for Jimmy the Greek. And when Jimmy finds his shed empty this morning, I want him thinking it was some new, dumb kid who doesn't know the rules. Not a professional who took out his guard and stole his ATV. He was creating a ghost. A sloppy amateur ghost for Jimmy to chase, while the real threat was quietly setting up shop on the other side of the mountain." Ellie tucked the 50 into her pocket. "You got it." "And Ellie," he said as she started the car, "don't get any ideas about that package. It's for him, not for you." She just grinned and pulled away, the Camaro's engine rumbling. Jace watched her go. He felt the weight of the $100,000 deal pressing on him, but it wasn't a weight of fear. It was a weight of purpose. He had a plan. He had his equipment. He had 100,000 reasons to be smarter, faster, and more brutal than anyone else in the game. He was building an army, and right now he was the only soldier. But that was about to change. Chapter 3. The meadow was a different world. Up here, 1,000 feet above the valley floor, the air was sharp and clean, and the silence was so complete it felt like a pressure against the eardrums. For 2 days, Jace worked, hauling the stolen pump, the hoses, and the solar panels he'd bought with his last harvest cash up the steep track from where he'd hidden the Toyota. His back ached, his hands were raw, but with every piece of equipment he put in place, the $100,000 deal with Ray felt less like a dare and more like a business plan. He set up the pump by the creek, ran the black irrigation lines up the 30-foot slope to the meadow, and staked them out in long, neat rows. He cleared brush, turned the soil, and laid down tarps to create a clean workspace. He wired the solar panels to a bank of deep-cycle batteries he'd stolen from a construction site, creating a self-contained power source for the pump and the lights he'd need later. This wasn't a shed. This was an operation. He had room for 200 plants, easy. He was setting up a camo tarp over the main work area when he heard it. A low, angry buzzing, like a nest of giant hornets. It grew louder, echoing off the rock faces of the surrounding hills. He dropped the tarp and scrambled up the rock ridge that overlooked the valley, pulling himself flat behind a gnarled manzanita bush. 2 quads came into view on a fire road a half-mile below. They weren't kids out for a joyride. The men riding them were dressed in brown and green, and they moved with a purpose. One of them had a rifle slung across his back, the distinctive curved magazine of an AK-47, clear even at this distance. They stopped, and one of them raised a pair of binoculars, scanning the surrounding hillsides. Not looking for deer. They were looking for him. Or people like him. Jace didn't move a muscle. The man with the binoculars swept the ridge line, and for a heart-stopping second, Jace thought he'd been seen. But the man's gaze moved on. After a minute, they kicked the quads back to life and continued down the fire road, their buzzing fading back into the silence. Jace slid back down the rock face, his mouth dry. This wasn't Jimmy the Greek's lazy guard. This was something else. This was an army. He was squatting in someone else's kingdom, and they had patrols. The next day, he drove the Tacoma down to a nursery near Garberville that was known for selling high-grade clones with no paperwork. The place was run out of a series of dilapidated greenhouses by a man everyone called Old Man Hemlock, a relic from the 60s with a long gray beard and eyes that had seen too much sun. "Just starting out, are you?" Hemlock asked, looking at Jace's clean hands. "Just expanding," Jace said. "I need 50 clones. Blue Dream, if you have it. Something that finishes fast. Got some nice ones just rooted." Hemlock led him into a greenhouse thick with the smell of young plants. "Putting them outdoors?" "Yeah. In the hills." Hemlock stopped and looked at him. "Which hills?" "Does it matter?" "It might," the old man said. "There's new money up there. Serious money. Not guys like me, not anymore. These are corporations, they just don't have names on the door yet. They got patrols. Guys with guns that ain't for hunting." "I saw them," Jace said. "Then you're a fool for staying," Hemlock said, turning back to his plants. "That land belongs to them now. They just haven't filed the paperwork with the county. They find you, they won't call the sheriff. They'll just make you disappear. I'll be careful." Hemlock chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "That's what they all say. That'll be 250 for the 50 clones." Jace paid him and loaded the flats of tiny plants into his truck. The old man's warning didn't scare him. It focused him. He wasn't just fighting for 100 grand anymore. He was fighting for a piece of the mountain. The quiet men on the quads weren't just a threat, they were the competition. And Jace knew he couldn't afford to lose. Back in Fortuna, he found Ellie waiting by his shed, leaning against her Camaro and filing her nails. "You find me some guys?" Jace asked. "Maybe." She didn't look up. "Depends what the job is. The guys I know, they don't like digging ditches." "The job is sitting on a mountain and watching grass grow," Jace said. "And keeping people away who aren't supposed to be there." "That sounds like digging ditches, but with guns." "There's guns," Jace confirmed. She finally looked at him. "You're serious?" 50 pounds in 3 months is serious. He handed her another 50. "I need one guy to start. Someone young, hungry, and stupid enough to not ask a lot of questions. Find me that guy." She found him 2 days later. His name was Sam. He was maybe 18, skinny, with a bad haircut, and a desperate need to be part of something. He looked at Jace with wide, reverent eyes. Ellie had obviously sold him a story. "You the man?" Sam asked. I'm the guy who pays you, Jace said. Ellie tell you the deal? Yeah. $200 a week in product. I watch the farm. There's no farm yet, Jace said. First, we build it. You'll be living up there. I'll bring you food and water once a week. Your job is to work. And to watch. You see anyone, you don't talk to them. You don't wave. You get on the radio I give you, and you call me. That's it. What about the quads? Sam asked. Jace looked at Ellie. She shrugged. He asked what the risks were. I told him. You see the quads, Jace said to Sam, you get invisible. You hide. They're not your problem. They're my problem. Okay, Sam said, nodding eagerly. He was in. He was part of a crew. Jace looked from Sam's hungry, foolish face to Ellie's cool, calculating one. He was building his own army now. A general with 2 soldiers, a drifter and a lost boy. It was pathetic. But it was a start. All right, Jace said. Let's go to work. Chapter 4. Sam was a good worker. Too good. He treated the 50 clones Jace had planted in the high meadow like they were his own kids, talking to them, trimming off sucker leaves with a reverence that made Jace's teeth ache. The kid had built a lean-to out of branches and a tarp, dug a proper latrine, and kept the irrigation lines clear. But he was just one kid. 50 pounds of weed didn't grow itself, and it sure as hell didn't guard itself. You're doing good work, Sam, Jace said, standing on the edge of the clearing. He'd brought a week's worth of MREs, water, and a fresh battery for the radio. But we need more hands. Okay, Sam said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of a dirty hand. He looked happy to have the company. Who we getting? Not guys like you, Jace said. He didn't mean it as an insult, but Sam's face fell a little anyway. I need guys who've done this before. Guys who know what to look for besides bugs. He found them where you always found cheap, disposable muscle. In a dive bar south of Fortuna that smelled like spilled beer and regret. A place where out-of-work trimmers and laid-off loggers drank away their afternoons. He didn't go himself. He sent Ellie. She knew the territory. She came back with 2 names, Nate and Cole. They're a package deal, she said, sliding into the passenger seat of Jace's Tacoma. They were parked a block away from the bar. They ran security for an outlaw grow-up near Bridgeville till the feds chopped it down last year. Did 6 months in county for it. They're thirsty. They reliable? Ellie laughed, a short, sharp sound. They're ex-cons who live in a single wide with 3 other dudes. They're as reliable as their next meal. You want loyalty? Buy a dog. Tell them to meet me. The Old Mill Lookout. 1 hour. They were already there when Jace pulled up. Nate was big and soft, with a gut pushing against a faded Raiders t-shirt and the sullen, resentful eyes of a man who blamed the world for his problems. Cole was the opposite, wiry, tense, with meth-pocked skin and a nervous energy that made him seem like he was vibrating. A coiled snake. You're the boss, Nate said, not bothering to get out of their rusted-out El Camino. I'm the guy with the job, Jace said, leaning against his truck. He didn't show them the gun, but he kept his hand near it. Ellie tell you the terms. Product for payroll, Cole said from the passenger seat, his voice a low rasp. How much product? £1/4 pound a week. Each. For sitting on a hill and keeping your eyes open. Nate grunted. That's it. Babysitting plants. You're not babysitting, Jace said. You're security. There are other players in the area. They run patrols on quads. They carry rifles. Your job is to be my alarm system. You see them, you radio me. You don't engage. You don't get brave. You hide and you call. Cole's eyes lit up at the mention of rifles. What are we carrying? You're carrying the shotguns I give you, Jace said. And nothing else. You're a deterrent, not an army. He looked them both in the eye. You do your job, you get paid. You cause problems, you skim product, you get lazy, then the job ends badly. We clear. Nate and Cole exchanged a look. It was a silent conversation Jace wasn't part of. Then Nate nodded. Yeah, he said. We're clear. The first crew was assembled. It was a joke. A scared kid and two broke-down ex-cons who looked at him like he was a meal ticket they were already thinking of cashing in. But they were bodies on the mountain. They were a first line of defense. Jace needed to send a message to Ray, a progress report. He couldn't use Ellie. She was becoming his de facto HR manager. He needed another cutout. Someone clean. He was buying zip ties and contractor bags at a hardware store in Arcata when he saw her. She was arguing with the clerk about the store's return policy for a can of paint that was the wrong shade of blue. She had dark hair, a tattoo of a hummingbird on her wrist, and an attitude that said she wasn't used to not getting her way. She was the sister of a small-time coke dealer Jace had bought from once or twice, a guy named Marco. Her name was Mia. Jace waited for her in the parking lot. Problem with the paint? He asked as she came out, fuming. The color on the can was ocean breeze, she said. The color in the can was sad gray wall. And that asshole in there acted like it was my fault. Clerks are the worst, Jace said. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Do I know you? You're Marco's sister, right? I'm Jace. Oh yeah, she said, her expression softening a little. The weed guy. That's me. He pulled a small, vacuum-sealed bag from his jacket pocket. An eighth of the best stuff from his Fortuna shed. Her eyes widened. What's that for? A conversation, Jace said. Get in the truck. The deal happened right there in the hardware store parking lot, in the cab of his Tacoma. It wasn't a negotiation. He gave her the bag of weed. She unzipped his jeans. The encounter was quick, impersonal, almost businesslike. He stared out the windshield the whole time. Afterward, as she was straightening her clothes, he got to the point. I need you to do something for me, he said. Yeah, she said, a little breathless. What's that? I need you to take a message to a man named Ray at the Gilded Leaf dispensary. The fancy one on the plaza? That's the one. He handed her a sealed envelope. There was no money in it, just a single, perfectly cured cannabis leaf. A sign. Give this to him. Tell him the project is on schedule. That's it. Don't say my name. Don't answer any questions. She looked from the envelope to his face. She wasn't stupid. She knew this was a different game than her brother played. What's in it for me? She asked. More of that, Jace said, nodding at the bag of weed he'd given her. Whenever you want it. And you stay on my good side. She tucked the envelope in her purse. Okay, she said. But I'm not your girl. I'm not looking for a girl, Jace said. I'm looking for someone who can deliver a message. He drove her back to her car and watched her go. Another tool in the box. He felt a surge of something that felt like power. He had a crew guarding his mountain. He had a girl running messages to his buyer. He was a boss. A player. He drove back toward the hills, the setting sun in his rearview mirror. He felt good. But as he looked up at the dark, silent mountains, he saw the flicker of a headlight from a quad, high up on a distant ridge watching the valley below. And he knew that all he'd really done was build a bigger cage with more dangerous animals inside. Chapter 5. The 50 plants in the high meadow were no longer clones, they were bushes. The mountain air, the clean water from the creek, the uninterrupted sun, it was like a miracle grow steroid cycle. Jace walked the rows, touching a leaf, pinching a bud. The smell was thick, resinous. A fortune taking root in stolen soil. Sam followed him like a disciple, pointing out plants that needed more nutrients, asking questions about flowering times. "They look good," Sam said for the 10th time that morning. "They look like 30 pounds, Jace said, doing the math in his head. "Maybe more. Not the 50 Ray wants, but it's a start." A 30-pound start was $90,000. Enough to make him a problem for a lot of people. Nate and Cole were supposed to be watching the access road. Jace found them by their tent, 100 yards from the grow, sitting on overturned buckets, smoking. Cole was sharpening a knife with a whetstone, his movements quick and twitchy. Nate was just sitting there, a big soft lump of uselessness staring into space. The shotgun Jace had given him was leaning against a tree 10 feet away. "Anything to report?" Jace asked. Nate looked up, his eyes slow to focus. "Nah, man. Quiet." "You walked the perimeter this morning?" "Walked it yesterday," Nate grunted. "Nothing out there but squirrels." "The deal is you walk it every morning," Jace said, his voice flat. "And the shotgun? It doesn't do any good, leaning against a tree." Nate shrugged, a slow, insolent roll of his shoulders. "Ain't nobody coming up here." "Someone came up here last week," Jace said. "Remember? On quads. With rifles. Haven't seen him since." Jace looked at him, at the lazy disrespect. This was a test. A soft probe to see where the line was. Jace didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked back to the grow, leaving Nate with his smirk. Cole watched the whole exchange, his knife never stopping its soft shhhk against the stone. The grow was good, but it could be better. The solar panels he'd boosted from the campground were barely enough to run the water pump. To get a real yield, to push 50 pounds, he needed more light for the critical flowering stage. Big 1,000-watt HPS lights, not the cheap LEDs he could afford. And that meant a real generator. That meant more cash. He sent Ellie a text, "Find me a buyer. Quick and dirty. 5 pounds. She set up a meet for the next night, in the parking lot of a closed-down lumber mill. The buyer was a biker, a big man with a long braided beard, and a leather cut that said "Messengers of Despair." He wasn't interested in conversation. "Let me see it," he said, his voice a low rumble. Jace opened a cooler in the back of the Tacoma. The biker stuck his face in, inhaled deeply, and grunted with approval. He tossed a thick, lumpy envelope onto the tailgate. 5 gigaseconds, the biker said. "You get more, you call the girl. We'll buy it." He took the cooler and was gone. Jace counted it under the dome light of the truck. All there. The first real profit from the mountain. He bought the generator the next day, a quiet Honda model that wouldn't echo all over the valley. He hauled it up the mountain in the back of the truck, then carried it the last half-mile on his back. His crew watched him do it. Sam offered to help. Nate and Cole didn't move from their buckets. Jace set the generator up, filled it with gas, and ran a heavy-duty extension cord to the clearing. He had 2 HPS lights he'd bought with the cash, still in their boxes. He was wiring the first one when he heard Nate's voice. "Hey boss. That's a nice generator." Jace looked down from the ladder. Nate was standing there, a weak smile on his face. Cole was behind him, by the trees, watching. "Should do the job," Jace said. "Thing like that must have cost a pretty penny," Nate said. "Makes a guy think. All this product growing, all this nice equipment. A guy could start to feel like he ain't getting his fair share, you know." There it was. The line. Jace came down the ladder slowly. He set his wire strippers on a crate. "You feel like you're not getting your fair share, Nate?" "I'm just saying," Nate said, trying to sound casual, but his eyes were hard. "It's a lot of work sitting up here. A lot of risk. That £1/4 a week, it ain't much when you see the big picture." "The deal was the deal," Jace said. "You don't like it, you can walk." "No, I ain't saying that," Nate said, holding up his hands. "Just making an observation." "Here's an observation for you," Jace said. He picked up a 2-foot length of steel rebar he'd been using to stake a tarp. He walked over to Nate. He wasn't angry. He was calm. This was a business decision. A human resources issue. "What's that for?" Nate asked, his smile faltering. He took a half-step back. "This is a message," Jace said. "For you. For Cole." He looked over Nate's shoulder at the wiry man, who was now standing very still by the trees. "It's about morale." He swung the rebar, a short, sharp crack against Nate's left hand, which was resting on a tree stump. The sound was sickeningly wet. Nate screamed, a high, strangled sound, and fell to his knees, clutching his hand. It was already swelling. One of his fingers bent at an angle that wasn't natural. "My fucking hand!" Nate shrieked, tears streaming down his face. "You broke my fucking hand." "I know," Jace said. He tossed the rebar on the ground. "Now you have a reason to feel like you're not getting your fair share. But you'll still do your job. You'll walk the perimeter. You'll hold your shotgun. And you'll do it with one hand. If I have to come back up here and break the other one, then I'll just find someone else for the job." He looked past Nate at Cole. Cole hadn't moved, his face a pale, unreadable mask. "We clear?" Nate was just sobbing now, a big blubbering mess. Jace walked over to Cole. "I asked if we're clear." Cole swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He gave a jerky nod. "Yeah, man. We're clear." Jace needed another man. One more body to keep an eye on his other bodies. He met Mia at a coffee shop. He gave her a bag with an ounce of weed in it. "I need you to do something for me," he said, stirring his coffee. "Getting tired of running messages?" she asked, a playful smirk on her face. "I need you to let people know I'm hiring. Another spot on the mountain. Same deal as before." "Who do I let know?" "Everyone," Jace said. "Your brother, his friends. The guys at the bar. I don't care. Put the word out. The good ones will find their way to me." She looked at the bag of weed, then at him. "You're really building something up there, aren't you?" "I'm building a business," he said. The new guy showed up 2 days later, sent by Ellie. His name was Luke. He was quiet, wiry, with the haunted eyes of a vet, though he looked too young to have been anywhere. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just nodded when Jace told him the rules and said he was ready to work. Jace took him up the mountain. Nate was sitting by the tent, his hand wrapped in a dirty bandage, his face sullen. Cole was walking the perimeter, shotgun in hand. When he saw Jace, he gave a nervous wave. Jace stood on the ridge, looking down at his expanding kingdom. He had a crew of 4. He had a generator and lights. The plants were growing fat and happy. He felt a surge of pure, uncut power. He was a player. He was in control. But as he scanned the opposite ridgeline, miles away, he saw a flash of light. A reflection. Sunlight off a pair of binoculars, maybe. Or a rifle scope. It was gone, as quickly as it came. It was probably nothing. But the feeling was there, cold and persistent. The feeling of being watched. Chapter 6. The business was breathing. It took in cash, water, and sunlight, and it exhaled the thick, skunky perfume of a coming fortune. Jace had the generator running for 12 hours every night, bathing the 50 bushes in a brilliant artificial sun. The buds were swelling, getting dense and heavy. The first harvest was only a few weeks away. He needed to keep his buyer happy, keep him patient. A taste was in order. He met Mia in the parking lot of a car wash. He liked using her. She was clean, unconnected to his operation, and she liked the transactional nature of their arrangement as much as he did. It was simple. He pulled up in the Tacoma, and she got in the passenger seat. She didn't say hello. She just looked at the small, vacuum-sealed package of weed on the dashboard. "For me?" she asked. "For your time," Jace said. He handed her a thick white envelope. "This is for Ray. At the dispensary." She weighed the envelope in her hand. It was heavy. "This isn't a leaf. It's a down payment. A sign of goodwill." The envelope held $5,000 in 20s. Part of the cash he'd taken off the biker. Same instructions as last time. "Give it to him, tell him the project is ahead of schedule, and walk away." He asked questions. "He won't," Jace said. "Men like Ray don't ask questions when you're handing them money." She tucked the envelope into her purse, then picked up the bag of weed. "And my payment?" "It's yours." She smiled, a quick, sharp little smile. "I like doing business with you, Jace." She leaned over the center console, unzipped his jeans, and paid for her time. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. It was efficient. When she was done, she got out of the truck. "I'll drop it off on my way home," she said. "Anything else?" "No," Jace said. "That's it." He watched her walk away, another problem solved, another message sent. He felt like a general, moving pieces around a map. Up on the mountain, the pieces were moving on their own. Sam was taking a piss behind a cluster of rocks near the supply tent when he heard their voices. Nate and Cole. They were sitting on their buckets, supposedly watching the road, but the road was quiet. Their voices carried in the thin, clear air. "Look at him," Nate was saying. He sounded sullen, his voice thick with resentment. "Getting fatter every day. Like little green pigs." "Gonna be a hell of a payday," Cole's raspy voice answered. "For him, maybe," Nate said. He was cradling his bandaged hand. It had swollen up, turning a puffy, bruised purple. "We're up here eating MREs, getting paid in table scraps. He's down there driving around in his truck, counting his money." "The deal was the deal, Nate." "The deal's bullshit," Nate snarled. "Look what he did to my hand." "For what?" "For asking a question. You think he's gonna give us a fair cut when this is all over? He's gonna give us a pound or two and tell us to get lost. Or put a bullet in our backs." There was a long silence, just the sound of Cole's knife sharpening on the whetstone. S888K S888K. "So what's the play?" Cole asked, his voice low. "The play is we do our job," Nate said. "We watch the plants. We let him do all the hard work for the harvest. The trimming, the curing. We wait till it's all in bags, ready to go. Then one night we take it. All of it. Him, the kid, the other one, they can't stop the two of us." "What about his gun?" Cole asked. "He ain't gonna be expecting it from us," Nate said. "We're his guys. We wait till he's asleep." S888K S888K. The sound of the knife was the only answer. Sam backed away from the rocks, his heart a cold stone in his stomach. He felt sick. He crept back to the main clearing, his mind racing. He had to tell Jace. But when? How? Nate and Cole were always there. Always watching. The hiker came out of the trees in the late afternoon. He wasn't a threat. He was just a man, maybe 60, with a white beard, a bright red windbreaker, and a pair of binoculars around his neck. He was looking at a bird in a tree, and he took a wrong turn off a trail a mile away. He walked into the clearing where Nate and Cole were sitting, and froze, his face a mask of confusion. "Oh," the hiker said. "Hello there. I must be lost." Nate and Cole exchanged a look. It was fast, predatory. Cole stood up, the knife in his hand. "Yeah," Cole said. "I think you are." Sam saw it happening from the far side of the grow. He saw the hiker's friendly confusion curdle into fear. I'll just be on my way," the hiker said, starting to back away. "I don't think so," Nate said, getting to his feet, his good hand flexing. "You see, we got a real sensitive ecosystem up here. Can't have people trampling through it." The hiker turned to run. Cole was faster. He moved in a blur, grabbing the man by the shoulder, spinning him around. The hiker cried out, a thin, startled sound. Cole put the knife to his throat. No. Sam yelled, a stupid, useless word from across the clearing. Nate looked over, saw Sam, and his face hardened. Stay out of this, kid. This is crew business. Cole dragged the terrified hiker back toward the trees. What did you see, old man? Cole whispered, his voice a dead rasp. You see anything up here? Nothing, the hiker pleaded, tears in his eyes. I swear to God, I saw nothing. I'm just bird watching. You saw the wrong fucking bird, Cole said, and he drew the knife quickly across the man's throat. It wasn't a big, dramatic slash. It was a short, efficient zip, like opening a letter. A dark red line appeared on the man's neck. He made a wet, gurgling sound and fell to his knees, clutching at his throat, his binoculars bouncing off his chest. He collapsed onto the pine needles and was still. Cole wiped the knife on the dead man's pants. He looked over at Sam, his eyes flat and empty. He saw us, Cole said, as if that explained everything. Nate walked over and kicked the body. Fucking tourist. When Jace got to the mountain the next morning, the mood was wrong. The air was thick with it. Nate and Cole were sitting by the tent, trying to look casual. Too casual. Sam was by the irrigation pump, his face pale, his movements jerky. What happened? Jace asked. He didn't raise his voice. Nate shrugged. Had a visitor yesterday. What kind of visitor? Some old dude in a red jacket. A hiker. Walked right into the camp, Cole said. He saw everything. Jace looked at them, then at Sam. The kid wouldn't meet his eyes. Jace already knew the answer, but he had to ask. Where is he now? We took care of it, Cole said. There was a hint of pride in his voice. He'd solved a problem. He'd shown initiative. Jace walked over to the edge of the woods. He saw the patch of disturbed pine needles, the dark, almost black stains soaking into the earth. He came back to the center of the camp. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shocked. The dead man was just a complication. A loose thread. Show me, he said. They led him to a shallow grave they dug 100 yards away, covered over with branches. Did he have a car? Jace asked. Didn't see one, Nate said. Did he have a phone? A wallet. Cole pulled a wallet and a smartphone from his pocket. Right here. Jace took them. The wallet had a California driver's license. Michael Peterson, age 62, from San Rafael. A credit card. $63 in cash. Jace pocketed the cash. He smashed the phone with a rock until it was a pile of plastic and glass. The hole's not deep enough, Jace said, his voice quiet. Animals will dig him up. I want it 10 feet deep. Then I want you to take his car keys, find his car, and drive it to the airport parking lot in Eureka. Leave it there. Wipe it down. Understand? Nate and Cole looked at each other. They'd expected him to be happy, or at least impressed. Instead, he was giving them orders. Yeah, boss, Nate mumbled. And Sam, Jace said, turning to the kid. Sam flinched. Get a shovel. You're helping. Jace stood there and watched them work. 3 men digging a grave for a man they didn't know, for a reason that no longer mattered. He felt nothing. The hiker was just another logistical issue. Another mess to be cleaned. But as he looked at Sam's terrified face, and then at the cold, resentful glare from Nate and Cole, he knew the real problem wasn't buried in the ground. It was standing right here, holding a shovel, waiting for him to turn his back. Chapter 7. Jace made the drive up the mountain at 3 in the morning. Not because he had a bad feeling, but because it was Tuesday, and Tuesday was when he swapped out the batteries for the handheld radios. It was a routine. Routines kept the business running. It was the little things, the details, that kept you from ending up in a hole someone else dug. The first thing he noticed was the silence. The generator, wasn't running. He'd set it on a timer to kick on at 10 p.m. to supplement the solar. He killed the lights on the Tacoma a half-mile from the camp and coasted to a stop, then walked the rest of the way, the Smith & Wesson in his hand. The camp was a wreck. The supply tent was slashed open, bags of nutrients and soil amendments kicked over and scattered across the ground. The generator was gone. And the smell of his plants was faint, diluted. Wrong. He moved into the main clearing. Half the plants were gone, hacked from their stalks, leaving behind wounded, weeping stumps. An entire section, at least 20 plants, maybe 20 pounds of prime, ready to harvest bud, had been ripped out of the ground. Then he heard the sound. A low, wet moan from the lean to where Sam slept. Jace moved toward it, the gun up. Sam was on his cot, writhing. His left pant leg was soaked through with something dark that glistened in the moonlight. "Jace," Sam whispered, his voice thin and reedy. "Man, you gotta help me." "What happened?" Jace asked. His voice was flat. He was already taking inventory, calculating the loss. 20 pounds. At the price the biker paid, that was 20 grand. Gone. "It was Nate and Cole," Sam gasped, clutching his leg. "Last night. They said it was payday. They started cutting the plants. I tried to stop them. Cole, he just shot me, man. He just shot me in the leg and laughed." "Where'd they go?" "Don't know. They took the generator. Loaded up the plants in contractor bags. They were talking about some guy in Redding who'd buy it all, no questions." Jace knelt beside the cot. The wound was ugly, a messy hole just above the knee. Sam was pale, his skin clammy. He was going into shock. "You gotta get me to a hospital, Jace," Sam pleaded, his eyes wide with fear and pain. "I'm bleeding out. I didn't tell him nothing. I swear." Jace looked at the kid. The earnest, stupid kid who talked to plants. He was a loose end. A witness who could tie him to this illegal grow, to the stolen equipment, to whatever happened next. If Sam went to a hospital, he'd have to talk to cops. He'd have to explain the gunshot wound. He would tell them everything. It wasn't malice. He was just a kid who didn't know the rules. "Okay, Sam," Jace said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "We'll get you taken care of. Just need to stop the bleeding first." Sam's face flooded with relief. "Thanks, man. I knew you wouldn't just leave me." "I'm not going to leave you," Jace said. He stood up and walked over to the supply tent. He came back with a roll of duct tape and a heavy-duty zip tie. "What's that for?" Sam asked, trying to sit up. "A tourniquet," Jace said. He looped the zip tie around Sam's thigh, high up near the groin. "This is gonna hurt." He pulled it tight. Sam screamed, a thin, sharp sound that was swallowed by the immense silence of the mountain. Jace took the roll of duct tape and wrapped it twice around Sam's mouth. Sam's eyes went wide with a new kind of terror, a primal understanding dawning too late. He struggled, but he was weak from blood loss. Jace put the muzzle of the Smith & Wesson against Sam's forehead. He wasn't angry. He wasn't sad. This was just closing a parenthesis. It was business. "You did good work, Sam," he whispered. Then he pulled the trigger. The sound was a dull pop in the enclosed space of the lean-to. He wrapped the body in the tarp Sam had used for a mattress and dragged it to the hole where they'd buried the hiker. It was a tight fit, but he made it work. He shoveled the dirt back in, packed it down tight. The problem was solved. Now for the next one. He knew where Nate would go. A man like Nate, with a broken hand and a head full of resentment, holding what he thought was a winning lottery ticket, he wouldn't be smart. He wouldn't lay low. He'd go somewhere he could feel like a king for a night. He'd go to a bar. Jace found him at a place called the Fog Line, a roadside dive off 101 that catered to truckers and bikers. The parking lot was full of Harleys and semis. Nate's beat-to-shit El Camino was parked near the back. Jace didn't go in the front. He walked around to the back, to the overflowing dumpsters and the side door that was propped open with a brick to let the cigarette smoke out. He could hear the jukebox playing some old country song about regret. He stepped inside. The bar was dark, crowded, loud. Nate was at a corner table with two women who looked like they'd been ridden hard and put away wet. He was drinking whiskey from a shot glass, his bandaged hand resting on the table next to a pile of money. His cut already spent. He was telling a story, laughing too loud, trying to be the man he thought he was. He hadn't even sold the weed yet. He was celebrating the idea of being rich. Cole was nowhere in sight. He was the smart one. He'd be with the product, setting up the deal. Jace walked through the crowd. No one noticed him. He was just another face in a place full of them. He got to the table. Nate looked up, and the blood drained from his face. The laughter died in his throat. "You?" Nate stammered. Jace didn't say anything. He drove his fist into Nate's mouth, a short, hard jab that snapped his head back and sent a shot glass skittering across the table. One of the women screamed. Nate scrambled up, knocking his chair over. He was big, but he was soft and slow. He swung a wild, clumsy punch that Jace slipped under easily. The bar erupted. Not in a panic, but in the way a dogfight starts. A circle formed. People were yelling, shoving, wanting to see the blood. Jace moved in close, under Nate's flailing arms. He had the boning knife from the Walmart run in his hand, the one he'd used to kill Vic. He'd been carrying it ever since. He slammed Nate against the wall, the impact knocking a framed beer mirror to the floor with a crash. "Where's Cole?" Jace snarled, his voice a low growl under the noise of the crowd. "Fuck you." Nate spat, a trickle of blood running from his lip. He tried to bring his knee up. Jace drove the knife into Nate's soft gut. He pushed it in deep, then twisted it. Nate's eyes went wide, a look of profound, almost comical surprise on his face. He made a soft woof sound as the air went out of him. His body went slack against Jace's. Jace pulled the knife out and shoved Nate away. Nate stumbled backward into the screaming, surging crowd, his hands clutching the dark, spreading stain on his Raiders t-shirt. He looked down at it, then back up at Jace, a question in his eyes. Then he collapsed. In the chaos, Jace was just another body pushing for the door. He was out in the cool night air before anyone even knew what had happened. He got to the El Camino, popped the glove box. It was empty. He checked under the seats. Nothing. No address. No phone number for Cole. He heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. Cole had the weed. 20 pounds of it. And Cole was smart enough to be anywhere. Jace had solved one problem, but the real problem, the $20,000 problem, had just vanished into the night. He got into his Tacoma and drove away. Just another truck pulling out onto the highway, leaving the sirens and the shouting and the body behind. Chapter 8. The drive back to Fortuna was a blur of headlights and frustration. Jace's knuckles were raw where they'd connected with Nate's teeth. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a sour, metallic taste in his mouth. Nate was a problem solved, but he wasn't the problem that mattered. Cole was the problem. The wiry, quiet, thinking problem. And Cole had 20 pounds of his product, which meant Cole had $20,000 of his money. Jace pulled the Tacoma into the alley behind Sal's place and killed the engine. The shed was dark, a silent cinderblock box. He got out, his body aching, and walked to the door. He was thinking about Redding, about how a man like Cole would move the weed, who he would know. He wasn't thinking about the here and now. That was the mistake. He put his key in the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. A shape detached itself from the deep shadow inside, moving with a silent, unnatural speed. Before Jace could react, something hard slammed into the side of his head. He saw a flash of white light and stumbled sideways, his ears ringing. "Been waiting for you, boss," Cole's voice rasped from the darkness. Jace tried to draw the Smith & Wesson, but Cole was on him, a whirlwind of sharp elbows and wiry strength. They crashed against the grow tent, the thin mylar walls crinkling, the frame groaning. Jace swung blindly, connecting with something soft. Cole grunted, but didn't let go. His hands were like claws, grabbing, tearing. He was fueled by meth and a righteous sense of betrayal. "Where's Nate?" Cole hissed in his ear, his breath hot and foul. "He's retired," Jace gasped, trying to get his feet under him. Cole laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Figured as much. He was a liability." He shoved Jace hard against the wall, the cinder block scraping his back. "That's okay. Saves me a cut. Now, where's the rest of it?" "The rest of what?" "The cash." Cole slammed Jace's head against the wall again. The purple glow of the single grow light swam in Jace's vision. "The money you made off that side deal. The $5,000 you paid the biker. I know you got it stashed. Nate told me. Give it to me, and I walk away. I take my 20 pounds, and you and me were even." Jace's vision started to clear. Cole was standing too close, confident. He was monologuing. Jace drove his knee up hard, aiming for the groin. It connected, but not squarely. Cole grunted in pain and surprise, his grip loosening for a half-second. It was enough. Jace shoved him back and lunged for the Smith & Wesson. His fingers brushed the grip, but Cole was on his back again, tackling him to the concrete floor. The gun flew from Jace's hand, skittering under the table where he kept his nutrients. They rolled on the floor, a tangle of limbs in the purple twilight. Jace was stronger, but Cole was faster, meaner. He was all bone and sinew, and sharp edges. He got a handful of Jace's hair and slammed his head against the concrete. Once. Twice. The world went fuzzy at the edges. Cole got on top of him, straddling his chest, his pale pockmarked face inches from Jace's. "You should have just paid us, you stupid kid," he snarled, and his hands closed around Jace's throat. The pressure was immediate, immense. Jace's air was cut off instantly. He clawed at Cole's wrists, but Cole's grip was like iron. Black spots danced in Jace's vision. The hum of the carbon filter seemed to get louder, then farther away. He was losing. He was going to die on the floor of this grimy shed, choked to death by a man he'd hired for a quarter-pound of weed a week. He bucked, trying to throw Cole off, but it was useless. His struggles grew weaker. The world was shrinking to a single point of purple light. The shed door creaked open. Neither of them noticed at first. Jace was dying, and Cole was focused on the job. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. "What the hell is going on in here?" Ellie's voice cut through the haze. Cole glanced over, his concentration broken for a second. "Get out of here, bitch. This ain't your business." Jace used the moment. He bucked again with the last of his strength, and hooked a leg around Cole's, unbalancing him. Cole's grip loosened for a fraction of a second. Jace sucked in a raw, desperate gasp of air. Ellie saw the gun on the floor, half hidden under the table. She didn't hesitate. She wasn't a hero. She was a pragmatist. And the man being strangled on the floor was her only source of income. She scrambled for the gun. Cole saw her move. He let go of Jace's throat with one hand and lunged for her. "I said get out." Jace came alive, driving his head up into Cole's chin. There was a crack of teeth. Cole screamed in pain and fury. He turned back to Jace, his hands reaching for his throat again. The shot was deafening in the small space. It was a clumsy, panicked shot, fired from the hip. It hit Cole high in the shoulder, spinning him around. He stared at Ellie, a look of pure, dumbfounded surprise on his face. He looked down at his shoulder, at the blood welling up through his shirt. Then he looked back at Ellie, who was holding the big black gun in two shaking hands, her eyes wide with shock at what she'd just done. Cole took a staggering step toward her. You shot me." She fired again. The second shot hit him in the chest. He stopped, stood there for a long second, swaying. He opened his mouth, but only a wet, gurgling sound came out. Then he fell forward, landing face down on the concrete with a heavy final thud. Silence. The only sound was the hum of the fan and Ellie's ragged, shallow breathing. Jace pushed himself up, his throat on fire, sucking in air. He looked at Cole's body, then at Ellie, who was still holding the gun, pointing it at the floor. "He was going to kill you," she whispered. Jace crawled over to the gun, took it from her trembling hands. Her job was done. He was back in charge. "Yeah," he said, his voice a raw croak. He was. He stood up, his legs shaky. He looked down at Cole. Another body. Another mess. "You did good," he said to Ellie. It was the closest he could get to "thank you." She just stared at the body, her face pale. What do we do now?" "We clean up," Jace said. They wrapped the body in the same kind of contractor bags Cole had used to steal his weed. They put it in the back of the Tacoma. Jace found a 55-gallon drum behind an auto body shop and loaded it into the truck. The solution was becoming a routine. He drove them out to a deserted stretch of farmland west of town, a place of fallow fields and collapsing barns. They found a dry irrigation ditch. They put Cole in the barrel, doused him with gasoline, and Jace lit a rag and tossed it in. The whoosh of the fire lit up their faces. Ellie flinched, but Jace just watched, his expression unreadable. They stood there until the fire burned down, two strange figures illuminated by the unholy glow. On the drive back, Ellie finally spoke. "You owe me," she said. Her voice was steady now. She had processed the event, calculated the new angles. "I know," Jace said. "Not just a bag of weed," she said. "Not anymore. I want more. A real cut. Or I can't guarantee I'll stay quiet." Jace looked at her. Her face in the flickering dashboard lights was hard. She had saved his life, and now she was leveraging it. He should have been angry. But he wasn't. He understood. It was business. "Okay," he said. "Okay. You want in, you're in," he said. "But you work for me. You do what I say when I say it. And you never ever pull a gun on my business again unless I tell you to." She was quiet for a moment. "Deal." Jace dropped her at her car. He went back to the shed. He was alive. He was still in business. But the game had changed again. He'd lost 20 pounds of product. Cole was gone, but so was the 20 grand. And now, his only real asset was a girl who had saved his life and immediately used it as collateral. He didn't trust her. He would never trust her. But he would use her. And he knew, as he locked the door to the shed, that she would be thinking the exact same thing. Chapter 9. The silence in the shed after the fire was different. It wasn't the silence of paranoia anymore. It was the silence of a balance sheet. The assets column was short 20 pounds of premium flour. The liabilities column had a fresh entry, Ellie. She was sitting on an overturned bucket, watching him clean the Smith & Wesson with a rag and some solvent. She hadn't said a word since they got back. "He was going to kill you," she said finally, as if testing the words in the air. "He was," Jace said without looking up. "And you stopped him. That makes us partners, right?" "It makes you useful," Jace said, sliding the magazine home. "Partners split the profits. You get a salary. Stay useful, you keep getting paid." Ellie was quiet for a moment, considering the terms of her employment. "Okay," she said. "So what's the first job, boss?" Before Jace could answer, the burner phone on the table vibrated, a harsh, buzzing sound against the wood. A number he didn't recognize. He let it buzz. It stopped, then buzzed again immediately. That meant it was important. He picked it up. "Yeah. Jace. It's Ray." The voice was smooth, friendly, like the polished concrete floor of his dispensary. "Just calling to check in. See how the art project is coming along." "It's coming," Jace said. Good. I like to hear that. A pause. Ray's pauses were never empty. They were filled with calculation. Funny thing, though. The market is a chatty place. And the story I'm hearing is that your studio had a bit of a hostile takeover. That some of the art is now in the hands of a different collector. Jace's knuckles went white around the phone. Cole must have started making calls to Redding before Nate even got to the bar. The news was already on the street. Stories get told, Jace said, his voice flat. They do, Ray agreed pleasantly. Here's the thing, Jace. I don't care about stories. I care about deliverables. And my partners, the gentlemen who provided the capital for my enterprise, they care about them even more. They're not artists. They're investors. They look at this as a portfolio, and right now, your asset is underperforming. I'll handle it. I'm sure you will, Ray said, and for the first time, the friendly tone frayed at the edges, revealing something hard and cold beneath. But let me be perfectly clear. My partners don't have the patience for a scrappy comeback story. They have a schedule. You are on that schedule. If you miss your delivery date, I have to explain to them why their investment failed. And when I have to do that, I have to give them something else instead. Usually, I give them the person who failed. They have, let's call them liquidators. They turn bad assets into closed accounts. Am I making myself clear? A liquidator. It was a clean, corporate word for a man who put you in a hole. Who are your partners, Ray? Jace asked. Ray laughed, a soft, genuine laugh this time. It was the scariest sound Jace had ever heard. You don't want to know. They're not people you meet. They're people you read about in the business section, or see on a billboard asking for your vote. They're the silent part of silent partner. Just know that they expect a return on their investment. You have 2 months left. Deliver the £50, or I deliver you. Have a nice day. The line went dead. Jace put the phone down. He looked at Ellie. She'd heard everything, her face pale in the purple light. So we're fucked, she said. We're not fucked, Jace said. We're motivated. He needed to find Cole's £20. Redding. It was a big town, full of people who bought and sold things, no questions asked. He couldn't just walk in and start asking around. He'd get robbed or killed before lunchtime. He needed a scout. Someone disposable. Someone who knew how to look helpless, how to listen, how to fade into the background. Someone who wasn't Ellie. He needed Tara. He found her working the morning shift at a coffee shop in Eureka. Not the Rusty Pelican. This place was clean, bright, and smelled of burnt coffee and scones. She wore a green apron over a black t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back, and she looked tired but not broken. When she saw him walk in, her face hardened. She finished taking an order from a woman in yoga pants, then moved to his end of the counter. There's a restraining order, you know, she said, her voice a low hiss. Carl took one out. The cops are looking for you. I'm not here about Carl. Then get out. I don't want you here. I need to talk to you, he said. We've got nothing to talk about. The last time we talked, I watched you almost kill a man with a piece of pipe. He deserved it. Maybe he did, she said, her eyes flashing with anger. That doesn't matter. You enjoyed it. I saw your face. Jace put $100 bill on the counter. I need a favor. She looked at the money, then at him. A flicker of something, disgust, temptation crossed her face. My favor-doing days are over. Especially for you. I heard you were trying to get to Portland, Jace said quietly. Heard your car broke down. Heard your sister wasn't much help. Ellie had been useful, after all. She'd found out where Tara had landed. Tara's face went tight. You had me followed. I had someone listen, Jace corrected. There's a difference. You need cash. I need someone to listen for me. He pushed another $100 bill onto the counter. I need you to go to Reading for a few days. Hang out. Go to the kind of bars where people sell things they shouldn't have. Listen for talk about a guy, skinny, twitchy, name of Cole. He's new in town, and he's trying to move a big load of premium Humboldt weed. 20 pounds. And if I find him? You don't do anything, Jace said. You get a name. The name of the bar, the name of the buyer he's talking to. Then you call me. That's it. $500 a day, plus expenses. He put 3 more $100 bills on the counter. A down payment. She stared at the money. $500 was a month's rent. A bus ticket to Portland and a new start. Or it was a deal with the devil who stood in front of her. Why me? She whispered. Because you're smart, Jace said. And because you look like a victim. No one will see you coming. She took the money. He knew she would. That night, he met her in the parking lot of the motel where she was staying. He gave her another $1,000 and a burner phone. For expenses, he said. Don't call me from your phone. She stood by the door of her beat-up car, the envelope of cash in her hand. This is crazy, Jace. It's business, he said. He reached out, put a hand on her arm. She flinched, but didn't pull away. He pulled her toward him. The hookup was a grim, silent transaction in the front seat of his truck. It wasn't about passion. It was about ownership. It was a seal on the deal, a reminder of what he was paying for. When it was over, she pulled away, her face a pale oval in the dark. What happened to you, Jace? She asked quietly. You used to just be a kid, trying to get by. That kid is gone, Jace said. He died in a shed in Pine Ridge. He left her there and drove back to his own shed. He had a crew of 2, a girl he was blackmailing and a girl he was paying to be a spy. He was 20 pounds short on a deal that could get him killed by men whose names he would never know. He lay down on his cot, the Smith & Wesson on his chest, and stared into the purple darkness, listening for the sound of the phone that would tell him where his money was. Chapter 10. The waiting was a physical thing, a sour taste in his mouth. Jace sat in the hot, close air of the Fortuna shed, staring at his 10 small plants. They were useless. A hobby. He was 50 pounds short on a $100,000 contract, and the men he owed were the kind of people who solved problems with liquidators. He had 2 assets left in the world, a spy in Reading named Tara, and a girl who'd saved his life named Ellie, who was currently sleeping in her Camaro down the street. It wasn't an army. It was a witness list. The burner phone vibrated on the concrete floor. He snatched it up. Tara's number. Yeah. He was here, Tara's voice said. It was thin, frayed. Cole. He was at a bar called the Watering Hole last night, bragging about the score. Trying to find a buyer. Was, Jace said. Past tense. A long silence on the line. What does that mean? It means he's not there anymore, Jace said. The product's gone. It's a ghost. He could hear her take a shaky breath. Oh God, Jace. Forget about Cole, he said, his voice hard. I have a new job for you. A more important one. He paused. You still have the envelope I gave you? The one with the leaf in it? The what? Yeah, I think so. In my car. Good. I want you to call Ray. At the dispensary. Tell him you have a message from the artist. Tell him there was a problem with the studio, a fire. Tell him half the crop was lost, but the other half is secure, and that we're rebuilding at a secondary location. Tell him we can deliver 25 pounds in 1 month, and the other 25 the month after that. He'll never go for it, she said. He'll know you're lying. He won't, Jace said. Because you're going to sound scared when you tell him. You're going to sound like a girl who is in way over her head and is telling the truth because she's terrified. You're going to give him bad news, but you're going to give it to him straight. People like Ray, they appreciate that. It makes them feel like they're still in control. And if he says no? He won't, Jace said again. He needs this product almost as much as I need to sell it. His partners are watching him too. Buy me a month, Tara. That's all I need. He hung up before she could argue. He couldn't grow 50 pounds, not even 25, in this shed. He had to go back to the mountains. Not his old spot. That was a graveyard now. Somewhere new. Somewhere small enough to hide. But he had no clones, no cash to buy them. He had to take them. For 2 nights, he sat in the dark in the stolen Tacoma, parked on a ridge overlooking one of the big corporate grows, the one patrolled by the quiet men on quads. He watched them through binoculars. Their patterns were predictable. They made a sweep at dusk, another at dawn. Between 10 at night and 4 in the morning, the mountain was left to the owls and the ghosts. On the 3rd night, he went. He wore dark clothes and carried nothing but the boning knife and a pair of sterilized pruning shears. He moved through the woods with a practiced silence, a ghost in his own right. He found the perimeter of their grow easily. It was a massive clearing, hundreds of plants in neat, disciplined rows under the moonlight. An ocean of green. It was beautiful, and it made him furious. He lay in the dirt for an hour, watching, listening. Nothing. He slipped under the single strand of wire that marked their property line. He was a trespasser. A thief. He felt more alive than he had in weeks. He moved to the nursery section, where they kept the mother plants and the freshly cut clones. He found a tray of Blue Dream, the same strain he'd grown before. They were perfect, their young leaves praying to the sky. He used the pruning shears, snipping 15 of them at the base, his movements quick and precise. He wrapped their root cubes in damp paper towels and slipped them into a canvas bag. He was just about to leave when he heard it. The low buzz of an electric motor. Not a quad. Something smaller. A golf cart, maybe. Patrolling the interior roads. Jace dropped flat behind a row of mature budding plants, the smell of them thick and overwhelming. The cart rolled past, not 20 feet away. 2 men, their faces illuminated by the green glow of a dashboard screen. They weren't talking. Just doing their jobs. They didn't see him. He waited until the sound of the cart faded. Then he slipped back out of the clearing and into the woods, the canvas bag clutched in his hand. He had his seeds. Now, he just needed a new garden. He found the spot the next day. A narrow bench on a steep hillside, hidden by a rock outcropping and a tangle of wild blackberry bushes. It was small, barely big enough for 15 plants. Pathetic. But it was defensible. And it was all he had. He needed a crew. A new one. He didn't trust Nate and Cole's old tent mate Luke, but he was a known quantity. The new guy was a question mark. Ellie found him for him. A kid named Derek, who washed dishes at a diner and had a gambling problem. He was quiet, scared, and desperate. Perfect. Jace met them at the trailhead, the 15 stolen clones in the back of the truck. All right, Jace said, not bothering with introductions. Here's the deal. The job is the same. You live up here. You watch the plants. You watch the trail. You see anyone, you call me on the radio. Anyone. He looked from Luke's haunted, unreadable face to Derek's nervous, twitchy one. My last crew got greedy, Jace said, his voice low and cold. They made a mistake. They thought the product belonged to them. They were wrong. He let the silence hang in the air. I pay in cash now. $500 a week. Every Friday. I don't pay in product, because I don't want you getting any stupid ideas about its value. He pulled the Smith & Wesson from his waistband. He didn't point it at them. He just held it. There's only one rule up here, he said. You don't steal from me. You don't lie to me. You don't even think about crossing me. Because if you do, I won't break your hand. I won't just fire you. I will drag you to a hole so deep your own mother will forget your name. Is that clear?" Luke gave a slow, solemn nod. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. He just stammered, "Why, yeah. Clear." "Good," Jace said. He put the gun away. "Now get to work. I want a perimeter established and a camp set up by dark." He left them there with the shovels, the tarp, and the 15 tiny stolen plants. He drove back down the mountain, the burner phone on the seat beside him. It buzzed. It was Tara. "He bought it," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "Ray." He wasn't happy. He said his partners wouldn't be happy. But he said okay. 1 month. "Good," Jace said. "Stay in Reading. Keep listening." He hung up. He had a new grow. He had a new crew. He had a month. He looked in the rearview mirror, at the vast dark mountains shrinking behind him. He wasn't a king up there anymore. He was a tenant farmer on a patch of stolen dirt, praying for rain. And he was watching everyone, especially the 2 men he'd just hired to watch his back. Chapter 11. Tara sat at the polished mahogany bar of a steakhouse in Reading that had leather booths and waiters in black vests. She was nursing a club soda with a lime, trying to look like she was waiting for a date who was very late. She'd been in town for a week, living off the cash Jace had given her, feeling the threads connecting her to her old life fray and snap one by one. Her job was to be invisible, to be a ghost, and she was good at it. She'd learned that much from Jace. She had called Ray, played the part of the terrified girlfriend, and delivered the story about the fire. Ray had been quiet on the other end of the line, his silence more threatening than any yelling could have been. He'd finally just said 1 month, and hung up. Now, Jace wanted her to keep an eye on him. "See who he talks to," he'd said on the burner phone. "Guys like him have tells. Find them." So she'd followed Ray. It was surprisingly easy. He drove a black Lexus sedan, and he wasn't trying to hide. He'd driven the 2 hours from Arcata to Reading, and walked into this steakhouse, a place where a glass of wine cost more than she used to make in an hour at the Rusty Pelican. Ray wasn't alone. He was at a corner booth with another man. This man didn't look like a drug dealer. He wore a crisp gray suit, no tie, and a pair of thin rimless glasses. He looked like a lawyer or an accountant. He had a government face, bland and forgettable and utterly confident. They were talking low, their heads close together over their menus. Tara moved from the bar to a small 2-top table nearby, pretending to read a text message. "The returns are excellent, Philip," Ray was saying. "The seltzer line alone is up 40%. The man in the suit, Philip, didn't look at his menu. "The senator isn't concerned with seltzer, Ray. He's concerned with liabilities." "The Humboldt situation is under control," Ray said quickly. "Too quickly." "Is it?" Philip said, his voice as dry as old paper. "My understanding is that your primary supplier went on a permanent vacation. And his replacement, this artist, seems to have an affinity for chaos. He's attracting the wrong kind of attention. People are talking. The kind of people who talk to other people with badges." "It's being handled," Ray said. "He's motivated to meet his deadline." "See that he is," Philip said. He finally looked at his menu. "Because if he becomes a liability, the senator will expect you to write him off. Not the product. The source of the problem. Permanently. You've done it before." He looked up at the waiter who had appeared at their table. "I'll have the New York strip, medium rare." Tara sat at her table, her heart a cold, frantic bird in her chest. A state senator. She had thought this was about a crooked dispensary owner and some out-of-town muscle. She had been wrong. This wasn't a drug deal. It was politics. And Jace wasn't a small-time grower. He was a line item on a balance sheet, belonging to someone who could make him disappear with a phone call. She paid for her club soda and walked out, her hands shaking. Jace was checking on the 15 plants when she called. They were doing well, thriving in the filtered sunlight of the new spot. He'd run irrigation lines from a hidden spring, and the plants were fat and happy. 25 pounds, he figured. Maybe 30 if he was lucky. Halfway there. He met a guy. Tara's voice was a strained whisper over the burner. In a steakhouse. The guy called himself Philip. He works for a state senator. Jace went very still. He looked over at Luke and Derek, who were cleaning the shotguns 50 feet away. You're sure? He said it. The senator isn't concerned with seltzer. He said you were a liability. He said if you fail, Ray has to write you off. She took a shaky breath. Jace, these aren't dealers. They're politicians. Jace looked up at the canopy of the trees, at the slivers of blue sky. He was a bug, under a magnifying glass, and the kid holding the glass was a state senator he'd never met. The $100,000 contract wasn't just a business deal. It was an audition. Or an execution order. Where are you? He asked. A gas station outside of town. I'm coming back. Good, he said. Meet me. The turnout on 299, the one by the river. Midnight. He hung up. She was waiting for him when he pulled up in the Tacoma. She was leaning against the guardrail, smoking, a lonely figure in the moonlight. He got out of the truck and walked over to her. You look scared, he said. You don't? She asked, her voice trembling. A state senator, Jace. They don't break your hands. They just make you vanish. He looked at her face, at the genuine terror in her eyes. This was good. Fear made people reliable. Fear was a leash. They need the money, Jace said, more to convince himself than her. The dispensary is a cash machine for them. They need the product to keep it running. As long as I deliver, I'm an asset, not a liability. And if you don't? Then I don't, he said. He reached out and took the cigarette from her fingers, took a drag. It tasted like her fear. He dropped it, crushed it under his boot. He put his hand on her neck, pulled her to him. The hookup was rough, urgent against the cold steel of the guardrail. It was a transfer of power. He was taking her fear, metabolizing it, turning it into something he could use. When they were done, she was leaning against the rail, breathing hard, looking out at the dark, rushing water of the river below. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. I want out. There is no out, Jace said, zipping up his jeans. You know who I am. You know who they are. You're part of it now. The only way out is through. He pulled a roll of cash from his pocket. $500. I need another man on the mountain. She stared at him, her face a pale blur. What? My crew. Luke and Derek. I don't trust them. I need another set of eyes up there. Someone to watch them. You want me to find you another hired gun? I want you to find me a guy who's hungry, Jace said. Someone who listens more than he talks. Go to the bars. The VFW hall. Put out the word. $500 a week cash. For security work. Send him to me. She looked at the money, then at his hard, unreadable face. She knew this was the price of her silence. The price of her life. She took the money. Okay, she said, her voice hollow. Jace left her there and drove back towards his mountain. The game had changed again. The board was bigger than he had ever imagined, and the players were invisible, powerful. They were senators and their aides, men who moved in a world of leather booths and quiet, permanent solutions. He was just a kid on a stolen patch of dirt, trying to grow a plant. But it was his plant, and he was halfway to his goal. He would deliver the 25 pounds. He would be an asset, And if they still decided he was a liability, he'd just have to become a bigger problem than they knew how to solve. He gripped the wheel of the truck, the feeling of Tara's fear still on his skin, and drove into the darkness. Chapter 12. Trust wasn't a currency Jace dealt in anymore. He paid his crew in cash and paranoia. He'd bring the $500 a week up to the mountain himself every Friday on the dot. He'd hand the envelopes to Luke and Derek, his eyes cold, his hand never far from the Smith & Wesson tucked in his jeans. He never knew when Tara would find him his third man, but for now these two were his whole security force. He watched them, the way a hawk watches a pair of mice in an open field. The plants were a week from harvest. They were heavy with resin, the buds dense and crystalline. Jace walked the small patch, his boots sinking into the soft mountain earth. He could practically smell the money. 25, maybe 30 pounds. Enough to satisfy the first part of Ray's deal. Enough to keep the liquidators away. He was counting the main colas on a particularly fat bush when he noticed it. A gap. Not a big one, but a definite empty space where a 1-pound branch should have been. A clean cut made with pruning shears. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a mistake. It was theft. He stood there, feeling the cold, familiar anger rise in his chest. It wasn't about the money. A pound was $3 grand, maybe less to a thief. It was about the principle. It was about the one rule. You don't steal from me. He didn't confront them. He didn't yell. He went back to the camp, where Luke and Derek were cleaning the shotguns. The new guy Tara found, a silent ex-logger named Gibson, was watching the trail. "Everything look okay up here?" Jace asked, his voice casual. "All quiet, boss," Luke said. He was wiry and still, his eyes holding a haunted emptiness that Jace had mistaken for loyalty. Derek just nodded, not looking up from his work. "Good," Jace said. "I'm gonna stay the night. Make sure everything goes smooth for the harvest prep tomorrow." He sat with them by their small fire as darkness fell, sharing a can of beans, listening to their quiet talk about football and women. He was one of them. The boss, taking an interest. He was watching Luke. The kid was trying too hard to be normal. He laughed a little too loud at Derek's stupid jokes. He couldn't keep still. He was a man sitting on a secret, and the secret was making him itch. Around midnight, when the fire was down to embers, and Derek was asleep in the tent, Jace saw Luke get up. He moved quietly, thinking Jace was asleep in his own lean-to. He slipped into the trees, heading away from the grow, toward a rocky outcropping on the far side of the clearing. Jace followed him, a shadow moving through the shadows. He had the shovel in his hand. Not the gun. The gun was too loud. Too quick. This needed to be a lesson, and lessons required effort. He found Luke by a pile of loose rocks. The kid was on his knees, pulling stones away, revealing a dark canvas bag tucked into a small cavity. His pound of stolen product. He was checking on it, making sure his retirement fund was safe. "Find what you were looking for, Luke." Jace's voice was a whisper in the dark. Luke froze, then whipped around, his face a pale mask of pure terror in the moonlight. "Jace. Man. I was taking a leak." "You piss in a bag?" Jace asked. He took a step closer, letting the shovel swing by his side. "It's not what it looks like," Luke stammered, scrambling to his feet. "I swear. I was just holding it for a friend." Jace laughed. A short, ugly sound. "A friend? You don't have any friends up here, Luke. You just have a boss. And you just broke his one rule." Luke made a run for it. He was fast, but he was scared, and he stumbled over a root. Jace was on him in 2 strides. He swung the shovel, not the sharp edge, but the flat of the blade, and brought it down hard across the back of Luke's legs. Luke screamed and went down in a heap. "Please, Jace," he begged, trying to crawl away. "Don't. It was a mistake." I'll give it back. I'll work for free. Jace stood over him. It's too late for that. This isn't a negotiation. It's a termination. He raised the shovel high and brought it down on Luke's head. The sound was a dull, heavy thud, like a melon hitting concrete. Luke went limp. Jace hit him again and again, his movements methodical, rhythmic. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just working. He was cleaning up a mess. When he was done, he stood there breathing hard, the shovel dripping. He looked over toward the camp. Derek was standing at the edge of the trees, a silhouette against the dying fire. He had seen the whole thing. He was holding his shotgun, but it was pointed at the ground. He was shaking so hard Jace could see it from 50 feet away. Jace walked back to the camp, the shovel in his hand. He didn't try to hide it. He walked right up to Derek. The kid looked like he was going to throw up. Get a tarp, Jace said, his voice quiet. We're taking out the trash. Derek didn't move. He just stared, his eyes wide with horror. Now, Jace said. The single word was as sharp and cold as a razor. Derek flinched and scrambled to do what he was told. They wrapped Luke's broken body in the tarp. Jace made Derek help him carry it to the hole where the hiker was buried. They opened it up. The smell was bad. Derek gagged and turned away. You put him in, Jace said. Derek looked at him, his face pleading. Do it, Jace said. Sobbing, Derek pushed the body into the hole. Jace handed him the shovel. Fill it in. Jace sat on a stump and watched Derek work, his clumsy, terrified movements illuminated by the moon. This was how you built loyalty. Not with money. Not with respect. With fear. Pure, undiluted fear. Derek would never steal from him. He would never talk. The image of what happened to Luke would be burned into his brain forever. The next day, Jace drove down to Eureka. He needed to be seen. He needed to control the narrative. He found a new girl named Kay working at a smoke shop that sold bootleg bongs and tie-dyed t-shirts. She was young, with bright pink hair and a bored, cynical look in her eyes. He bought a pack of rolling papers he didn't need. You new around here? She asked, making change. Just passing through, he said. He palmed her a tightly wrapped gram of the product Luke had stolen. Her bored expression vanished. What's this for? I need people to know something, Jace said. I need them to know that the new guy in the hills, the one who took over Vic's old territory, isn't to be fucked with. That he takes care of his problems permanently. She looked at the weed, then at his cold, empty eyes. She understood the currency. I hear things, she said. I talk to people. I know, he said. Spread the word. The mountain is mine. And I don't tolerate thieves. He left her there, holding the story he wanted her to tell. He hooked up with her a few days later in the back of her rusted-out Honda Civic. It was a quick, joyless act. A payment. As he was pulling up his jeans, she looked at him. People are scared of you, you know, she said. Good, Jace said. Fear is good for business. He left her there and drove back to his real life, to the lonely mountain where his last 2 employees watched him with terrified eyes, and the ghosts of the men he'd buried kept the soil rich. Chapter 13. The harvest was on. For 72 hours, the mountain was a factory floor. Jace, Derek, and the new guy Gibson, a silent, slab-faced ex-logger Tara had found, worked under the glare of the generator-powered lights at night and the hot sun during the day. They moved in a haze of sweat, exhaustion, and the overwhelming sticky sweet smell of cut cannabis. They snipped, trimmed, and hung branches on lines strung between trees until the entire camp looked like a bizarre pagan festival. Derek and Gibson worked with the frantic, silent terror of men who had seen their boss beat a coworker to death with a shovel. They didn't complain. They didn't ask questions. When Jace said, "Trim faster," they trimmed faster, their scissors a frantic clicking of steel. Jace watched them, a bag of zip ties on his belt, the Smith & Wesson tucked in his waistband, a constant quiet reminder of the terms of their employment. They were working near the southern edge of the meadow, a spot where Jace had pushed his luck, planting a dozen bushes in a sun-drenched patch that wasn't technically his. It was a calculated risk, a land grab of a few hundred square feet. He was trimming a fat, heavy cola when Derek suddenly went still. "Boss," Derek whispered, his face pale. "Listen." Jace heard it. The angry, mosquito whine of two-stroke engines. Not one or two. 4 of them. The corporate growers' quad patrol. But they were closer than they'd ever been before. They were coming up the ridge that formed the southern border of Jace's clearing. "Get down," Jace snapped. "Kill the generator." Gibson scrambled to shut off the Honda, plunging the clearing into the natural quiet of the woods. Jace dragged Derek by the shirt and pulled him behind a wall of hanging, drying plants. They crouched there, the smell of chlorophyll and fear thick in the air. The quads crested the ridge. 4 of them, moving in a practiced diamond formation. The riders wore dusty green fatigues and sunglasses. They weren't looking for Jace specifically. They were on a boundary patrol. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, the engines idling. One of them, the leader, pointed at a row of Jace's plants, the ones on the stolen ground. He didn't say anything. He just raised the rifle slung on his back, a short-barreled AK-47, and fired a burst into the dirt, not at the plants, but 10 feet in front of them. The sound was a sharp, percussive crack, crack, crack that echoed off the mountainside. The dirt kicked up in angry puffs. It wasn't an attack. It was a sentence. A statement of ownership. This far, and no farther. The riders sat there for a full minute, letting the message sink into the silent trees. Then as one, they turned their quads and drove back the way they came, the sound of their engines slowly fading. Derek was shaking, his face the color of ash. "We gotta go, man," he whispered, his teeth chattering. "We gotta pack up and go. They know we're here." "They've always known we're here," Jace said calmly. He was watching the ridge where they disappeared. This was just a courtesy call. A courtesy call. They were shooting at us. "They were shooting at the dirt," Jace corrected. "If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead." This was a warning. "Well, I'm warned," Derek said, his voice rising. "I'm outta here. This ain't worth $500 a week." Jace turned and looked at him. His eyes were flat cold. "You're not going anywhere. You walk off this mountain, and your problems will be a lot bigger than a few guys on quads." Derek saw the look in Jace's eyes, the same look he'd seen the night Luke died, and he shut his mouth. The fear of the men on the quads was a distant, abstract thing. The fear of Jace was right here, breathing the same air. Jace knew he couldn't let it stand. A warning, left unanswered, was an invitation to come back and finish the job. Ray and his politician partners were a threat from one direction. These guys were a threat from another. He was caught in the middle. The only way out was to make one side more afraid of him than he was of them. He waited until the next afternoon. He had Derek and Gibson stay in camp, trimming. He told them if he wasn't back by morning, to take what they could carry and run. He took the Smith & Wesson and a length of rope and went hunting. He found their track, a well-worn trail on the other side of the ridge. He followed it for a mile until it passed through a narrow cut between 2 large rock formations. A pinch point. He found a spot 30 feet up the hillside, a thicket of manzanita that gave him a clear view of the trail below. And he waited. Hours passed. The sun beat down. Jace didn't move. Around 4 o'clock, he heard the buzz. A single quad coming up the trail. A lone rider. Making a final sweep before dark. The quad came into the pinch point. Jace stood up and kicked a large basketball-sized rock loose. It tumbled down the hillside, crashing onto the trail right in front of the quad. The rider, startled, swerved hard. The quad's front wheel hit a rut, and the machine flipped, throwing the rider clear. He landed hard, his head bouncing off the packed earth with a sickening thud. Jace was down the hillside before the rider had stopped rolling. The man was dazed, trying to push himself up, his rifle still slung on his back. Jace kicked it away from him. "Who the hell are you?" the rider groaned, shaking his head to clear it. Jace didn't answer. He grabbed the man by the front of his fatigues and slammed him back against the rock face. The man was solid, maybe 40, with a thick neck and hard professional eyes. He wasn't scared. He was pissed off. He lunged at Jace, a thick forearm aiming for his throat. Jace sidestepped and drove the butt of the Smith & Wesson into the man's temple. The man staggered, his eyes glazing over. Jace moved behind him, got an arm around his neck and squeezed. The man struggled, his boots scrabbling for purchase, his hands clawing at Jace's arm. But Jace was a machine. He held the chokehold, his own breath coming in ragged gasps, until the struggling stopped and the body went limp. He held it for another 30 seconds, just to be sure, then let the man slump to the ground. He had learned from the fight with Cole. He didn't give them a chance to talk. He stood there, breathing hard, the silence of the woods rushing back in. He looked at the body. Another one. Another mess to clean up. But this was different. This wasn't a junkie or a tweaker. This was a soldier. And soldiers have armies. He took the Alaska .47 from the body. It was a Kalashnikov, solid and brutally simple. A weapon of war. It felt heavy, powerful. He took the man's radio, his knife, his wallet. The wallet held nothing but a fake ID and $300. Jace pocketed the cash. He hid the body in a deep crevice between two rocks, piling stones on top of it. He pushed the quad off the trail, sending it crashing down a steep embankment where it would be hidden by the thick brush. He wiped his prints from the rock he'd kicked loose. He brushed away his tracks. In an hour, it was like it had never happened. He walked back to his camp, the Alaska .47 slung over his shoulder. He felt its weight, its power. He had just declared war. That night, he drove down to Eureka. He met Kay, the pink-haired girl from the smoke shop, in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. He handed her a sealed envelope with $2,000 in it. "I need this to get to Ray at the dispensary," he said. "First thing in the morning. A cash drop. To keep him happy." She took the envelope, her eyes on the new rifle sitting on the passenger seat of his truck. "Things are getting heavy up on your mountain," she said. It wasn't a question. "Business is expanding," Jace said. He looked at her, his face a hard mask in the dashboard lights. "Just make the drop. And don't ask questions." She nodded, taking a step back from the truck. The old, easy transaction between them was gone. He wasn't just the weed guy anymore. She could see it in his eyes. He was something else now. Something dangerous. He drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot. He knew the dead man's partners would come looking. They would find the abandoned quad. They would know. Retaliation was coming. But tonight he held their gun. And he was ready for them. Chapter 14. The final weigh-in happened on a damp, foggy morning under the dripping canopy of the redwoods. Jace, Derek, and Gibson had worked for 2 straight days, trimming the last of the buds, their fingers raw, the air thick with the smell of a finished job. Jace watched the needle on the digital scale settle. 41 pounds. From 15 stolen clones and a patch of dirt he didn't own. It was a miracle of horticulture and desperation. It was also 9 pounds short. The deadline for the full 50 was in a week. He'd bought himself a month of silence from Ray with the $5,000 and Tara's story about the fire, but that month was up. Now the clock was ticking loud enough for the men in Sacramento to hear it. "This is it?" Derek asked, his voice hushed. He looked at the neatly packed, vacuum-sealed bags of weed. He saw a payday. Jace saw a death sentence with a 9-pound deficit. "This is it for now," Jace said. Pack it up. We're moving it down the mountain tonight. He needed more. He couldn't grow it. He couldn't buy it. Which meant he had to take it. The target was a grow run by a pair of brothers, the Jensens. They were old-school outlaws, relics who thought a shotgun and a bad attitude were still state-of-the-art security. Kay, the girl with the pink hair, had told him about their place. A ramshackle greenhouse set up in a hollow near Deansmore, right off the 36. They were sloppy, she'd said. They drank on the job. They flashed cash in town. They were an easy target. Jace left Derek and Gibson to guard the 41 pounds with a shotgun apiece and a simple instruction: shoot anything that moves that isn't me. He drove the Tacoma, the stolen Alaska 47, on the seat beside him. He didn't bother with stealth, not at first. He drove past the Jensen brothers' place in the middle of the afternoon, just another truck on a country road. He saw the layout: one large plastic-sheeted greenhouse, a dusty trailer, and a beat-up Ford F-150 parked out front. No fence. No cameras. Kay was right. They were sloppy. He came back after midnight, on foot, moving through the woods that bordered their property. He wore dark clothes, his face smeared with dirt. He carried the AK and a pair of bolt cutters. The night was quiet, except for the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the Jensen's generator. He found a spot in the tree line, 100 yards from the greenhouse, and watched. A single light burned in the trailer window. The silhouette of a man passed in front of it once, holding a beer bottle. An hour went by. The light in the trailer went out. Jace moved. He cut the chain on their access gate with the bolt cutters, a single loud snap in the night, and walked toward the greenhouse. Its plastic walls glowed faintly in the moonlight. The door was a simple wooden frame covered in plastic, held shut by a hook and eye latch. He lifted the hook and slipped inside. The heat and the smell hit him like a physical blow. The place was packed with plants in the last stages of flowering, hundreds of them. A forest of fat, dense colas. And in the middle of the greenhouse, hanging from wires, were dozens of drying branches from a recent harvest. 10 pounds at least. Right there for the taking. He was grabbing an armful of the drying branches, stuffing them into a contractor bag, when he heard the trailer door creak open. "You hear that, Earl?" a voice slurred from outside. "Hear what?" "You're drunk," another voice answered. Sounded like the gate. Jace froze. He dropped the bag and melted back into the shadows between two rows of tall plants, the AK held tight against his chest. One of the brothers, a big bearded man in overalls, stumbled toward the greenhouse, a shotgun held loosely in one hand. This had to be Earl. "Probably just a deer," the other one, Dale, called from the trailer porch. Earl fumbled with the latch on the greenhouse door and pushed it open. He stood there, silhouetted against the moonlight, and sniffed the air. "Smells funny in here," he said. He took a step inside. Jace knew he couldn't wait. He couldn't let them box him in. He rose up from between the plants and fired a short burst from the AK, not at Earl, but at the flimsy wooden doorframe next to his head. Splinters flew. The sound of the automatic rifle was obscene in the quiet greenhouse, a deafening, stuttering roar. Earl screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror, and dove backward out of the doorway, firing his shotgun blindly into the plastic wall as he fell. Buckshot ripped through the greenhouse, shredding leaves, a pattern of hot metal going nowhere. "He's got a goddamn machine gun!" Earl shrieked from the ground outside. From the trailer, the second brother, Dale, opened up with another shotgun, blowing a huge, ragged hole in the side of the greenhouse. Jace was moving, low and fast, scrambling between the rows of plants. This wasn't a clean operation anymore. It was a firefight. He was trapped. He crawled toward the back of the greenhouse, the smell of gunpowder mixing with the scent of weed. He could hear them yelling outside, trying to coordinate, their voices thick with panic and whiskey. He reached the back wall, took out his knife and sliced a long vertical slit in the plastic sheeting. He wriggled through, out into the cool night air. He was behind the greenhouse now. He crept along the wall, the axe ready. "I'm gonna circle around back," he heard Dale yell. "You keep him pinned down." Jace waited. He heard footsteps crunching on the gravel path that ran behind the greenhouse. Dale was coming. He was breathing hard, making no effort to be quiet. Drunk and stupid. Dale rounded the corner of the greenhouse, his shotgun held at his hip, ready to blast whatever came through the back. He was looking at the slit Jace had just cut. He wasn't looking at the deeper shadow right next to it. Jace stepped out of the shadow and shot him. A single, controlled burst to the chest. Dale flew backward, as if hit by a truck, his shotgun clattering on the gravel. He landed in a heap and didn't move. "Dale!" Earl yelled from the front. "You get him." Silence. "Dale." Jace didn't wait. He ran, not back the way he came, but in a wide circle through the dark woods, coming up on the trailer from the side. He saw Earl crouched behind the F-150, trying to reload his shotgun, his hands shaking. Jace raised the AK. He had a clear shot. He could end it right here. Another body. Another hole to dig. But he was tired of digging holes. He fired a burst into the truck's tires. Pop. 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 They exploded with loud, violent hisses. He fired another burst into the truck's engine block. Steam and smoke billowed from under the hood. He had taken their wheels. He had taken their nerve. Earl screamed and started firing his shotgun wildly into the darkness. Jace was already gone, melting back into the trees, leaving the chaos behind him. He circled back to the greenhouse, grabbed his contractor bag, and filled it with as much of the drying harvest as he could carry. 15 pounds. Maybe more. Enough. He ran back to his truck, his lungs burning, the heavy bag slung over his shoulder. He threw it in the back and drove away. No lights, the sound of Earl's pathetic, sporadic shots fading behind him. He was pulling onto Highway 36 when the burner phone rang. It was Tara. Her voice was a panicked whisper. "Jace, you need to listen. I'm at a bar in Arcata. I followed Ray after he left the dispensary." "What is it?" Jace said, his own adrenaline still singing in his veins. "He's meeting with him. Philip. The senator's aide. They're in a booth right now." "What are they saying?" "I can't hear everything. But I heard your name. Or not your name. They keep calling you the kid. Philip was asking about you. He said, 'Is the kid going to be a problem?' And Ray just smiled and said, 'Every problem has a solution.' Jace, they're talking about you right now. They're deciding what to do with you." Jace gripped the steering wheel. He had done it. He had the 50 pounds. He could make the delivery. But it didn't matter. He looked at the bag of stolen weed in his rearview mirror. He had solved one problem tonight, only to find out that the real problem, the one with the suits and the smiles, was already working on a solution for him. Chapter 15. Jace called Ray from a payphone outside a donut shop in Fortuna, the receiver smelling of stale coffee and disinfectant. The burner phone was for his crew, for his girls. A call to a man who might be planning your funeral felt like it needed the anonymity of old technology. Ray picked up on the second ring. "The Gilded Leaf." "It's the artist," Jace said. "The project is complete." A pause on the other end. Not a surprised pause. A quiet, calculating one. "Is it now?" Ray said, his voice smooth as polished glass. "All 50 pieces?" 56, actually, Jace said. He had his own harvest, and what he'd taken from the Jensens, all cured and packed. "I overproduced. Thought you might be interested in the surplus." He was testing him. See if he'd bite. See if this was still about business. "Let's stick to the original order," Ray said coolly. "My partners value punctuality over ambition. We'll settle up for the 50. There it was. They didn't want more product. They wanted the contract finished. They wanted the account closed. "Where do you want it?" Jace asked. "Our warehouse. South of Arcata, off the old mill road. There's a red gate. It'll be open. Midnight. Come alone. You'll have the payment." "The full amount," Ray said. "My partners are very keen to settle all outstanding debts." The line went dead. Back on the mountain, Derek and Gibson had the 56 pounds packed in 8 heavy-duty duffel bags, lined up like soldiers. They looked at the bags, then at Jace, their eyes full of questions they knew better than to ask. "All right," Jace said. He pulled 2 thick envelopes from his jacket. "This is it. The job's done." He handed an envelope to each of them. There was $2,000 in each one. More than they had earned. A severance package. "What do we do now, boss?" Derek asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You disappear," Jace said. "You take your money, you walk down this mountain, and you never mention my name or this place to anyone, ever. You go to Oregon. You go to Arizona. I don't care. But you don't stay in Humboldt." Gibson, the silent logger, just nodded, his face grim. He knew how these things ended. Derek looked like he wanted to say something else, but he saw the look in Jace's eyes and shut his mouth. "Go," Jace said. "Now." He watched them take their gear and melt into the trees, 2 ghosts walking away from a bigger one. He was alone on the mountain, with 56 pounds of weed and a $100,000 target on his back. He loaded 50 pounds, the best 50, into the back of the Tacoma, covering the bags with a tarp. He left the other 6 pounds and all the growing equipment. Let the next guy find it. Or let it rot. He didn't care. The warehouse was a big, corrugated metal box at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by a chain-link fence. The red gate was open, just as Ray had said. A single light burned over a loading dock. Jace pulled the Tacoma up, leaving the engine running, his headlights cutting through the damp, foggy air. The Alaska 47 was on the seat beside him. The loading dock door rolled up. Ray was standing there, dressed in his neat black polo shirt. He was alone. "Right on time," Ray said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "I appreciate a man who respects a schedule." "I'm here for the money," Jace said from the driver's seat. "And I have it," Ray said. "But first, the product. Let's see it on the dock." Jace got out of the truck, leaving the driver's side door open. He moved to the back, keeping an eye on Ray, on the shadows inside the warehouse. He hefted the first 2 duffel bags, swung them onto the dock. They landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "All of them," Ray said. Jace worked, his muscles straining, moving back and forth from the truck to the dock, piling up the bags. 8 trips. He was exposed each time, his back to the warehouse for a few seconds. He could feel the eyes on him. Ray's partners. Or their liquidators. He was sure they were here, watching from the dark. When the last bag was on the dock, Ray walked over and unzipped one. He pulled out a vacuum-sealed bag, held it to the light. He didn't smell it. He just looked at it, nodding. "Excellent work," he said. He pulled a heavy gym bag from just inside the warehouse door and slid it across the concrete. $100,000. In used 20s and 50s. As requested. Jace walked to the dock, never taking his eyes off Ray. He knelt, unzipped the gym bag. It was full of cash, bundled with rubber bands. It looked right. "My partners are very pleased," Ray said conversationally. "They appreciate a clean transaction. It closes the books on this particular venture quite nicely." Closes the books. The words hung in the cold air. This was it. The final payment. The severance. "They're so pleased, in fact," Ray continued, his voice dropping, "that they're concerned about you. A young man with your talent and your newfound liquidity. They worry you might attract the wrong kind of attention. Or get reckless. They feel a certain responsibility for your future. Jace stood up, the gym bag in his hand. He started backing toward his truck. You tell your partners I'm retired. I'm going to go lie on a beach somewhere. I'll be sure to tell them that, Ray said. His smile was a thin, cold line. They'll be glad to hear it. But his eyes said something else. They said, we know where all the beaches are. Jace got in the truck, threw the gym bag on the passenger seat, and put the Tacoma in reverse. He backed out slowly, the AK on his lap. His eyes locked on Ray until the warehouse was just a box of light in his rearview mirror. He didn't breathe until he was back on the highway. He drove to Eureka, to the 24-hour smoke shop. The bell over the door chimed. Kay was behind the counter reading a magazine, her pink hair a splash of defiant color in the dingy store. She looked up, and her bored expression faltered when she saw him. Store's closing in 10, she said. Good, Jace said. Lock the door. She looked at him, at the gym bag in his hand, at the wild, wired look in his eyes. She got up and locked the door. He didn't take her to a motel. He didn't take her to her car. He took her right there, in the cramped, dusty back room of the smoke shop, surrounded by boxes of bootleg glass pipes and boxes of incense. He pushed a stack of boxes to the floor, clearing a space. The hookup was hard, fast, and completely silent. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about burning off the ice-cold terror that had been living in his veins since the phone call with Ray. It was an act of pure, selfish gravity, a way to prove to himself that he was still alive, still a physical thing in the world. Afterward, she lay on a pile of packing blankets, looking at him. You got paid, she said. It wasn't a question. I got paid, he confirmed. So what now? You leaving town? Soon, he said, pulling on his clothes. He took a thick bundle of cash from the gym bag, $5 grand, and tossed it on the blankets beside her. For your trouble. She looked at the money, then at him. What was all this about, Jace? Really? It was about business, he said, shouldering the gym bag. He stood at the door to the back room. Ray. His partners. They're not done with me. How do you know? Because he was smiling when I left, Jace said. And men like Ray only smile when they know they've already won. He walked out of the smoke shop, leaving her with the cash and the lingering smell of his paranoia, and drove off into what was left of the night, $100,000 in a gym bag, and the cold certainty that he was now a loose end waiting to be tied off. Chapter 16. The $95,000 sat in a gym bag on the floor of a motel room in Crescent City. The room smelled like salt air and mildew. Jace had driven north, putting 100 miles of winding, redwood-lined highway between himself and Humboldt County. He thought the distance might make the money feel safer. It didn't. The bag didn't feel like a victory. It felt like bait. He was counting it for the third time, stacking the used 20s and 50s into neat piles on the stained bedspread, when someone knocked on the door. It wasn't a hard knock. It was a polite, official rap. Tap, tap, tap. The kind of knock that says, we know you're in there. Don't make this difficult. Jace swept the cash back into the bag and shoved it under the bed. He moved to the door, the Smith & Wesson, dug up from its last resting place before he left the mountain, a familiar weight in his hand. He peered through the peephole. A Crescent City police cruiser was parked next to his Tacoma. A uniformed officer stood at his door, his back to him, looking out at the parking lot. He was a big man, built solid, with a calm, patient posture. Jace opened the door a few inches, the chain still on. Yeah. The cop turned around slowly. He wasn't old, maybe 40, with a trimmed mustache and the kind of placid, unreadable eyes that saw everything and gave nothing away. His name tag said SGT Miller. Afternoon, Miller said, his voice a pleasant, easygoing baritone. Mind if I have a word? Am I being charged with something? Miller smiled, a small professional twitch of his mustache. Just a conversation. Your truck matches the description of one seen near a disturbance down in Humboldt a while back. Just clearing the books." It was a lie. A sloppy, transparent lie. This wasn't about the Jensen brothers' grow. This was something else. Jace slipped the chain off and opened the door. "I'm not from Humboldt." "I know," Miller said, his gaze drifting past Jace into the motel room, lingering for a half-second on the rumpled bed where the money had just been. "You're from nowhere. That's what your license says. That's what your truck registration says. You're a ghost. We get a lot of ghosts passing through here." Miller didn't ask to come in. He just leaned against the doorframe, casual, friendly. A man making conversation on a slow Tuesday. "Funny thing about ghosts, though," Miller continued, his eyes now on Jace's face. "They tend to trail things behind them. Noise. Trouble. I got a call this morning. From a friend of a friend. Down in Sacramento. A man who works in a very tall building with a nice view. Philip. The senator's aide. This friend," Miller said, "he's concerned about public safety. He heard a young man of your general description, a talented horticulturalist, recently came into a large sum of untaxed capital. And he worries that sort of thing can lead to instability in our quiet rural communities. Bad for tourism. Bad for property values." Jace didn't say a word. He just stood there, his hand resting on the pistol tucked in his jeans. "Now, a situation like that," Miller said, ignoring the gun, "it puts a guy like me in a tough spot. I've got a civic duty. But I've also got budgets to meet. Overtime is a killer. The paperwork on a major felony investigation, say one involving certain political associates down south, is just staggering. It takes resources. Manpower. Resources that, frankly, our small department doesn't have." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Unless, of course, a private citizen were to make a contribution to the department's discretionary fund. A community support grant, you could call it. To help us focus our limited resources on more pressing matters. Like traffic violations. Or lost dogs." It was the cleanest, most polite shakedown Jace had ever heard. This was the next level of the game. The cops didn't kick in your door. They knocked politely and presented you with an invoice. "How much of a contribution?" Jace asked, his voice flat. Miller's smile returned. "I think a $10,000 grant would show a real commitment to the community's well-being." Jace stared at him for a long moment. He could shoot him. Right here. But Miller wasn't alone. Miller was just a messenger boy. He was a uniform with a pension and a mandate from a man in a gray suit. Killing Miller would just bring 2 more cops, and they wouldn't knock. He turned, knelt by the bed, and pulled the gym bag out. He didn't look at Miller. He counted out $10,000, a thick stack of 20s and 50s. He walked back to the door and handed it to the sergeant. Miller took the money without looking at it and slid the thick envelope into an inner pocket of his uniform jacket. "We appreciate your support, son," he said, his voice full of civic gratitude. "It's good to know we have responsible citizens looking out for our town." He touched the brim of his hat. "You have a nice day. Try to stay out of trouble. The paperwork, you know." Jace watched him walk back to his cruiser, get in, and drive away. No lights, no siren. Just a man finishing his shift. Jace closed the door and bolted it. He had just paid $10,000 for the privilege of being left alone for a little while. He was no longer a ghost. He was a taxpayer. He was on the books. And they'd be back for the next installment. He had to get out ahead of it. He needed leverage. He needed something to hold over their heads, something that would make him more dangerous to them alive than dead. He needed to know who they were. He sat on the bed and called Tara on the burner phone. "Jace." Her voice was wary. "I need you to do something else," he said. No. We're done. I did what you asked. I'll wire you another $2,000. Western Union. Today. Silence on the other end. He could hear her thinking, weighing the fear against the money. What is it? She finally whispered. Go back to Arcata. Ray. The owner of the Gilded Leaf. I don't want you to follow him. I want you to watch his office. The one above the dispensary. I need to know who comes and goes. Not the dispensary employees. The other ones. The ones in suits. The ones who don't look like they belong. Like Philip. Especially like Philip, Jace said. I need a name. A license plate. A picture from your phone. Anything. I need to know who is pulling Ray's strings. And what happens when I find him? You don't do anything, Jace said. You just give the information to me. That's it. You're a ghost, remember? No one sees you. Jace, these people will kill you. Not if I find them first, he said. He hung up. He sat in the silent, musty motel room, the bag of money on the floor feeling lighter than it had an hour ago. He had beaten the men with knives and guns. He had beaten the men with shovels. But now, he was fighting men with cops and laws and silent, untouchable partners. It was a different kind of war, and he was losing. He needed a new weapon. Not a gun. A name. Chapter 17. The $10,000 Jace had paid the cop in Crescent City was a ghost. It haunted the new grow, a patch of 15 struggling plants he'd set up in another anonymous fold of the mountains. He'd used the last of his cash to buy the clones and the gear, setting up a bare-bones operation that felt like a step backward. He was broke again, living on beef jerky and the grim satisfaction of still being alive. The $85,000 in the gym bag was untouchable. That was his exit. Using it to rebuild felt like admitting he was never going to get out. His crew was down to 2. Derek and Gibson. They weren't a crew. They were a pair of scared hired hands who moved with the jumpy, cautious energy of men who knew their boss was more dangerous than anything that might come out of the woods. Gibson, the silent ex-logger, just did his work, his face a stony mask. Derek had started talking to himself, quiet little mutterings when he thought no one was listening. The fear Jace had instilled in him had started to curdle. You see anything on the patrol? Jace asked Gibson. They were at the edge of the small clearing. Gibson shook his head, spitting a stream of tobacco juice onto a fern. Couple hunters yesterday, way down the ridge. Nothing else. And the other guys? The ones with the quads. Ain't seen 'em since you took that fella's gun, Gibson said. He looked at the AK-47 Jace had leaning against a tree. He didn't look at it with envy. He looked at it like it was a snake. Jace knew the quiet wouldn't last. The men he'd stolen the AK from weren't the type to forget. Enrico's friends from Stockton, the ones whose stash house he'd hit, they weren't the forgiving type either. He was a man with 2 angry hornets' nests sitting on his shoulders, waiting for him to make a wrong move. The move was made for him. It happened just after dusk. The generator was running, powering 2 small lights over the young plants. Jace was cleaning the Smith & Wesson. Derek was trying to cook a can of beans over a small fire. Gibson was on watch at the edge of the clearing. The first sound wasn't the quads. It was a high, thin whistle. A bottle rocket, maybe. Then another. They shot over the clearing, trailing sparks. What the hell is that? Derek asked, dropping his spoon. Before Jace could answer, the night erupted. Not with gunshots, but with the roar of engines from all sides. 4 of them. Maybe 5. They came crashing through the underbrush, not on the trail, but straight through the woods, their headlights bouncing and slashing through the trees. They weren't on a patrol. This was an assault. Men were yelling, whooping like a hunting party that had cornered its prey. A Molotov cocktail, a beer bottle stuffed with a flaming rag, flew out of the darkness and shattered against a tree, bathing the edge of the camp in a sudden hungry orange light. "It's them!" Derek screamed, scrambling backward away from the fire. "It's the Stockton guys." Another bottle flew, this one landing squarely in the middle of the 15 young plants. The grow tent Jace had set up went up in a sheet of flame with a sound like a giant exhalation. Woomph! The plastic melted, dripped, and burned, the young plants turning to black sticks in seconds. Jace didn't waste time shooting at shadows. He grabbed the AK and the gym bag full of money. That was the only thing that mattered now. The plants were gone. The operation was gone. "Get to the truck," he yelled at Derek and Gibson. A quad roared into the clearing, its headlights pinning Jace in their glare. The rider was wearing a ski mask, a shotgun held across his handlebars. He brought the gun up. Jace didn't wait for him to aim. He sprayed a burst from the AK at the front of the quad, not aiming for the rider, but for the machine. The bullets chewed through the plastic grill, and the quad's engine died with a mechanical scream. The rider, thrown off balance, tumbled off as the machine tipped over. Jace ran, crashing through the burning undergrowth, the heat scorching his face. He could hear Derek yelling somewhere behind him. He didn't look back. He just ran for the ridge, where he'd hidden the Tacoma. He was halfway there, when another quad cut him off, roaring up a gully to his left. The driver was Rico's cousin, a guy Jace had seen once at a bar. He had a wild, triumphant look on his face. He gunned the engine, trying to run Jace down. Jace dodged behind a fat redwood as the quad flew past. The driver tried to turn, the wheels digging into the soft earth. He was exposed for a second. Jace stepped out from behind the tree, raised the rifle, and shot him. A clean, single shot to the chest. The man flew backward off the seat, his arms thrown wide. The quad, driverless, kept going for another 20 feet before it slammed into a rock and died. Jace kept running. He could hear more yelling behind him, but it was disorganized now. He'd broken their charge. He'd turned their party into a funeral. He reached the truck, threw the gym bag and the rifle inside, and started the engine. He waited, his heart pounding, listening. 10 seconds. 30. A minute. No one was coming. Derek and Gibson didn't show. They were either dead, captured, or they had run in the other direction. It didn't matter. They were gone. He was alone again. He drove down the mountain with his headlights off, navigating by moonlight, his whole body shaking with the aftermath of the fight. He had survived, but he had lost everything. The grow, the equipment, his crew. All gone. He drove to a different motel, in a different town. He sat on another lumpy bed, in another room that smelled like stale smoke. He took inventory. He had the gym bag with $85,000. He had the Alaska 47, and the Smith & Wesson. And in the back of the truck, under a tarp, he had the 20 pounds of weed he'd managed to salvage from the first mountain. His entire net worth. He had to start over. Again. From nothing. But he couldn't do it alone anymore. He needed a guard. Not a junkie like Derek or a ghost like Gibson. He needed someone who could do the job. He pulled out the burner phone and called the only person he could think of who was detached enough to be useful. "Kay," he said when she answered. "Jace. What's wrong?" "I need a guy," he said, his voice flat and empty. "A real one. Not a kid. Not a drunk. Someone who knows how to handle himself. Security. The pay is good." There was a pause on the other end. "I might know someone," she said slowly. "An old friend of my dad's. Did some time. Bounces at a rough bar down in Samoa. He doesn't come cheap." "I don't care what he costs," Jace said. "Just find out if he's interested." "What am I telling him the job is?" Jace looked around the grimy motel room, at the bag of money that felt more like a tombstone than a prize. "Tell him," Jace said. "The job is watching a dead man's back." Chapter 18. Jace sat in a room at the Red Tail Inn in Red Bluff, a town chosen for its beige anonymity and its distance from the coast. He had $85,000 in a gym bag under a bed that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. He had 2 guns and 20 pounds of weed in the trunk of a stolen Ford Taurus. He was rich, armed, and completely, utterly trapped. The fire on the mountain hadn't just burned his operation, it had burned his options. The burner phone vibrated against the cracked formica of the bedside table. He picked it up. It was Tara. Her name flashed on the screen, and for a second he felt nothing. She was just another piece on the board. "What do you have?" he asked. "No, hello." "Jace," she said. Her voice was a frayed wire. I did something." "You're supposed to be listening, Tara. Not doing." "I talked to Ray," she whispered. "He called me. He knew I was in town. He found me. He said he knew I was working for you." Jace sat up. The air in the room went cold. "What did you tell him?" "He scared me, Jace," she said, her voice cracking. "He wasn't like before. He said he knew you were alive. He said the Sacramento guys were amateurs. He said his partners were unhappy. He offered me money. A lot of money. Enough to get to Portland and start over, for real this time." "What did you tell him, Tara?" Jace's voice was flat, empty of everything but a dangerous calm. "I told him everything," she sobbed. "I told him you survived the fire. I told him you had the cash from the dispensary deal. I told him you were planning to run, to just disappear. I did it to save myself, Jace. You understand, right? It's just business. That's what you always say." Jace didn't say anything. He listened to her cry on the other end of the line. She was trying to justify it, to frame it in the cold-blooded language he had taught her. She had learned his lessons too well. "He's going to call you," she said. "He told me to tell you to answer the phone." The line went dead. Jace put the phone down on the bed. He looked at it, this small black rectangle of plastic and glass that had just delivered his death sentence. It buzzed, almost immediately. Ray's number. Jace picked it up. "Hello, Jace," Ray's voice said. It was different now. The polished, friendly veneer was gone. This was the voice of the man behind the curtain. "I trust you've received the updated status report on your account. It seems you've been a very poor steward of my partner's investment." "The deal was for £50, Jace said. "I delivered." "The deal was for you to be a quiet, profitable asset," Ray corrected. "Instead, you started a war with Rico's people. You brought heat to my doorstep. You cost us a productive piece of land. And then, you plan to abscond with our initial investment. That's not how a partnership works." "We're not partners." "No," Ray agreed. "We're not. You're a liability that needs to be brought back in line. So here is the new arrangement. Consider it a penalty for your poor performance. You will deliver another £50. Same quality. No payment. You will do this to demonstrate your commitment to our shared enterprise and to repay the damage you've caused. You have 1 month." Jace laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "I have no grow, no crew, no cash. How am I supposed to do that?" "That sounds like a personal problem, not an investment problem," Ray said coolly. "You're a resourceful young man. You steal things. You hurt people. You'll figure it out. Or if you don't, my partners have an alternative method for closing out delinquent accounts. And they are, I assure you, much less pleasant to deal with than I am. And if I just disappear?" Tara was kind enough to provide us with a list of your known associates. The girl with the pink hair, Kay. The girl from the Camaro, Ellie. Your former landlord, Sal. We have their names. We have their addresses. You disappear, Jace, and we start collecting your debts from them. One by one. Do you understand the new terms of your employment? Jace stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sun-bleached parking lot. He was in a cage, and Ray had just finished welding the door shut. Yeah, Jace said, his voice a dead whisper. I understand. Good. I'll expect to hear from you. The line went dead. Jace stood at the window for a long time. He wasn't angry. Anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. He was a machine, calculating the next move. Tara was a problem. Not because she had betrayed him. He had expected that, eventually, from everyone. She was a problem because she had become a weapon used against him. And you don't leave a weapon in your enemy's hand. He needed a lure. He called Kay. Hey, he said when she answered. Jace. Where have you been? People are saying you're dead. I'm not dead. I'm liquid. And I need to get some money to a friend. Tara. The bartender? That's the one. I owe her. But I can't meet her myself. It's too hot. I need you to do it for me. I'll give you $500 to be my delivery girl. I don't know, Jace. 1,000, he said. You pick up an envelope from me. You call her. You tell her I sent you with her cut. You give it to her. That's it. Easy money. He could hear her thinking. $1,000 for playing Western Union. Okay, she said. Where do I meet her? I'll text you the spot, he said. A quiet place. For her safety. The spot was a derelict fishing camp on the banks of the Sacramento River, a collection of rotting cabins and collapsed piers half swallowed by blackberry bushes. Jace was there an hour before the meet, hidden in the shadows of a collapsing bait shop. Kay drove up first, parked her Civic and got out, looking around nervously. A few minutes later, Tara's beat-up sedan pulled in. She got out, looking thin and haunted. She saw Kay, and her shoulders sagged with relief. She thought this was it. The payoff. The end of the story. He sent you. Tara asked Kay. Yeah, Kay said, holding out a thick envelope. He said this was for you. Tara reached for it. Jace stepped out of the shadows. Hello, Tara. Tara froze, her hand hovering in midair. She turned, and her face went white when she saw him. The look wasn't just fear. It was the absolute certainty of a prayer that has gone unanswered. Jace, she whispered. Kay backed away slowly, her eyes wide, and got in her car. She started the engine and drove away, leaving them alone by the river. I did it to live, Jace, Tara said, her voice shaking. That's all. The same as you. I know, Jace said. He walked toward her slowly. He wasn't holding a gun. He didn't need one. The difference is, I'm better at it. She tried to run. He caught her by the arm, spun her around. He didn't hit her face. That was for amateurs. He hit her in the stomach, a hard, driving punch that doubled her over, gasping. He hit her again, in the ribs. She went down to her knees, in the dusty gravel. He stood over her. This isn't because you talked to Ray, he said, his voice calm, conversational. This is because you let him use you against me. You became his tool. So now I have to break you so he can't use you again. He kicked her. A solid, ugly kick to the side. She cried out, a raw, animal sound of pain. He kicked her again. He was methodical. He broke 2 of her ribs, her left wrist, when she tried to block a blow. He was dismantling her, piece by piece. When he was done, she was a crumpled heap on the ground, sobbing, not even trying to get up. He hadn't killed her. A body brought cops, questions. A brutalized woman, telling a story about the ghost who came back from the dead. That was a warning. It would get back to Ray, to his partners. It would tell them, He wasn't running. He was fighting. And he was just as vicious as they were. He knelt beside her. She flinched away from him. "Tell Ray the next delivery is on its way," he whispered. He stood up, got in his truck, and drove away, leaving her broken but alive in the ruins of the fishing camp. He was starting over with no crew, no grow, and an impossible debt. But he had his money, and he had a plan. He was going to rebuild. And this time, he wasn't going to steal clones. He was going to steal whole operations. Chapter 19. The plan wasn't about rebuilding. Rebuilding was for men who had lost something to a fire, an act of God. This was different. This was repossession. Jace was a bank, and every other grower in a 100-mile radius was a delinquent account. Ray wanted 50 pounds. Jace would acquire 50 pounds. The same way a corporation acquires a smaller competitor, hostile takeover. The first target was a two-man operation in a converted barn near Redway. They were Serbians or Croatians, something with a lot of consonants in their names. Kay had told him about them. They were good growers, she said, but they were arrogant. They thought their reputation from whatever war they'd fought back home was enough to keep them safe. Jace didn't watch them for 2 days. He watched them for 2 hours from a ridge a half-mile away, using a pair of cheap binoculars. He saw one man go into town in a rusty pickup. He saw the other one sit on the porch of the barn, cleaning a rifle. That was their security system. One man with a rifle. He came back after dark, parking the stolen Taurus a mile down the road. He didn't go for the barn. He went for the power pole, 50 yards away. He climbed it with a lineman's belt and spikes he'd bought at a pawn shop. He found the transformer, took out a pair of insulated cutters, and snipped the thick black cable leading to the barn. The single light on the porch winked out. The hum of their fans went silent. He waited. 10 minutes later, the man with the rifle came out of the barn, cursing in a language Jace didn't understand. He had a big flashlight. He walked toward the power pole, away from the barn, to see what had happened. He was angry, not scared. That was his mistake. Jace circled around in the darkness. He was inside the barn before the man even reached the pole. He moved through the rows of plants, their leaves brushing against him like ghosts in the dark. He found the second man asleep on a cot in a back room, a pistol on a crate beside him. Jace hit him once with the butt of his own pistol. The man didn't even stir. Jace used a zip tie to bind his hands, another for his feet. He was waiting by the door when the first man came back, still muttering about the power company. He walked in, his rifle held loosely, his guard down. Jace stepped out from behind a rack of drying buds and shot him once in the chest with the silenced Smith & Wesson he'd bought in Reading. The sound was a dull cough. The man fell like a sack of dirt, his flashlight rolling across the concrete floor, its beam dancing crazily on the walls. Jace walked over, put another round in his head to be sure, and then went about his work. He wasn't here for their cured product. He was here for their factory. He spent the next 3 hours methodically dismantling their operation. He took their best 12 lights, their ballasts, their carbon filter, their water pump. He took 100 of their best-looking clones. He loaded everything into their own rusty pickup truck. He found their cash stash, $7,000 in a coffee can. He took that too. Before he left, he walked over to the man tied up on the cot. He was awake now, his eyes wide with terror. Jace put the silenced pistol to his forehead. "Tell your friends in Stockton this is my town," he said. Then he shot him. He drove their truck, loaded with their gear, off their property, leaving the 2 bodies behind for someone else to find. It was a message. The second operation was harder. It was a co-op of 3 growers who had pooled their money to set up on a piece of leased land near Miranda. They had fences, dogs, and a rotating watch. Jace watched them for a full day. He saw their weakness. They were lazy. The night watch was one guy who sat in a pickup truck at the front gate, listening to the radio. Jace didn't go through the gate. He went over the fence at the back of the property, a mile deep in the woods. He had the AK this time. He moved through their fields, a ghost in a sea of green. He found their processing shed. The door was locked. He shot the lock off. The sound was loud, deliberate. An announcement. Lights came on in the small trailer they used as a bunkhouse. A door flew open. A man ran out, yelling. Jace, hidden in the shadows by the shed, shot him from 100 yards away. The man crumpled. Another man appeared in the doorway, firing a pistol blindly into the darkness. Jace stitched a line of automatic fire across the front of the trailer, chewing through the thin aluminum walls. The man screamed and disappeared back inside. Jace ran to the pickup truck parked by the gate. The night watchman was trying to start it, fumbling with the keys. Jace shot him through the windshield. He didn't check to see if he was dead. He didn't have time. He drove the truck, his truck now, to the processing shed and started loading up. They had 30 pounds cured and packed in vacuum-sealed bags ready for sale. He took it all. He was closing the door when the third man came running out of the trailer, his hands empty, held high in the air. Hey. Okay. Okay. You win, he yelled, his voice cracking. Just take it. Take it all. Jace looked at him. The man was young, terrified. He had given up. Jace raised the rifle. The man's face dissolved into pure, begging terror. Jace lowered the rifle. Get in the truck, Jace said. What? Get in the back of the truck. Now. The kid scrambled into the back of the pickup, sobbing. Jace drove him 5 miles down a dirt road and pushed him out. Walk home, Jace said. Tell everyone what you saw. Tell them the name is Jace. And tell them I'm just getting started. He left the kid there, a crying, broken messenger, and drove off with his 30 pounds. He had it. He had the gear from the first grow, the 30 pounds from the second, and the 20 he already had. 50 pounds. Plus a factory's worth of equipment to start again. He had met Ray's impossible demand. He needed to move the cash. He couldn't keep it all with him. He called the burner phone for his new girl, Lila. She worked the graveyard shift at a motel that rented rooms by the hour. She was quiet, with tired eyes that had already seen it all, and a toughness that wasn't for show. He'd met her through Kay. He met her in the motel parking lot during her smoke break. I need a favor, he said, getting out of his truck. I'm on the clock, Jace. This is off the clock. He handed her a gym bag. It was heavy with the 78,000 he had left. I need you to hold this for me. In your apartment. Somewhere safe. She looked at the bag, then at him. She didn't ask what was in it. Why me? Because you're smart enough not to open it, he said. And you're smart enough to know what happens if it comes up short. He peeled $500 off a roll in his pocket. For the trouble. She took the bag and the money. It'll be safe. I know, he said. He got back in his truck. Their business was quick, clean, and silent. He hooked up with her later that night, in one of the empty rooms at the motel. It wasn't a transaction for the cash. It was a separate transaction, for the silence, for the need to feel something solid and real in a world that was coming apart. The next day, he called Ray. The delivery is ready, he said. So soon? Ray said, a hint of genuine surprise in his voice. I confess I'm impressed. Midnight, Jace said. The same warehouse. But this time, you come alone. Just you. No partners. No friends. You come with anyone else, the deal is off, and I burn the product. All 50 pounds of it. You understand. There was a long pause on the other end. Jace could hear him weighing the new reality. Jace wasn't the scared kid anymore. He was the one dictating terms. "I understand," Ray said finally, his voice cold and tight. Midnight. Jace hung up. He had the product. He had the power. He was going to walk in, drop the weed, and walk out. But he knew, as he loaded the bags into the truck, that it wasn't a delivery. It was a declaration of war. And he was bringing 50 pounds of ammunition. Chapter 20. Jace laid out the schematics on the stained carpet of a motel room in Reading. Not real schematics, just pencil drawings on the back of a gas station map. A plan for a new grow, bigger and smarter than the last one. He had the equipment, all of it stolen from the Serbians, stored in a U-Haul locker he'd rented under a fake name. He had $85,000, minus what he'd given Tara and Kay, stashed in a gym bag at Lila's apartment. He was liquid. He was equipped. He had won. He should have felt like a king. Instead, he felt like a man sitting in a locked room, waiting for the walls to start moving. The delivery to Ray had been too smooth. The $100,000 wasn't a payment. It was a severance check. And the smiling, polite way Ray had talked about his partner's responsibility for his future had been the coldest threat of all. He was planning his next move, thinking about buying a small, remote piece of land under his new corporate name, Humboldt Hillside Provisions, LLC. A legitimate business, built on a foundation of bodies and stolen cash. He was a player now, a man with a business plan. The thought was so absurd he almost laughed. The burner phone, the one he only used for Tara, buzzed on the nightstand. He told her to lose the number, to disappear. The fact she was calling meant something was wrong. "They're going to kill you, Jace." Her voice was a raw whisper, stripped of everything but pure animal terror. I went back. To the steakhouse. I don't know why. I had to know. Know what, Tara? I put my phone on the bar, set to record. I walked past their booth, on my way to the restroom. Philip and Ray. It was just a few seconds of conversation. Her breath hitched. Philip said, he said the asset was now a liability. He said the senator's re-election campaign couldn't afford any loose ends. He told Ray to retire the asset permanently. He said it wasn't a request. So there it was. Not a suspicion. A confirmation. The 50 pounds hadn't been a penalty. It had been a final project before termination. A way to get what they wanted before they cleaned up the mess. Jace, are you there? Where are you, Tara? On a bus. Heading east. Don't call this number again. The line went dead. Jace sat in the silence of the motel room. The schematics on the floor looked like a child's drawings. His plans for expansion, for going legit, it was all a joke. He wasn't a player. He was a loose end. He packed his bag, checked out of the motel, and drove the stolen Taurus to a truck stop off I-5. He sat in the car for an hour, watching the river of trucks and cars flowing north and south. He was trying to think, to plan, but his thoughts were a static buzz. He was being hunted, but he didn't know what the hunter looked like. He went inside to get a coffee. When he came back out, a gray Ford Fusion was parked 2 rows over. It was clean, anonymous. A rental. A man was in the driver's seat, reading a newspaper. He was middle-aged, balding, wearing a cheap windbreaker. He looked like an insurance salesman. He didn't look at Jace. Jace got in his car. He pulled out of the truck stop and headed north. The Ford Fusion pulled out 30 seconds later. It kept a professional distance, 2 cars back. It never got closer, never fell farther behind. It was a shadow, glued to his bumper. This was him. The liquidator. The man Ray and Philip had sent to retire the asset. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a guy on his way to a regional sales meeting. And that was terrifying. Jace's mind went cold, clear. The panic was gone, replaced by the familiar, ugly pragmatism that had kept him alive. He couldn't outrun him. He couldn't hide. He had to end it. On his terms. He drove for another 20 miles, the Fusion a constant presence in his rearview mirror. He took the exit for a 24-hour gas station and travel center, a big bright island of light in the dark farmland. The place was busy, truckers fueling up, families stretching their legs. There were witnesses, but there was also chaos. Anonymity. Jace pulled up to a pump on the far side of the lot, away from the main building. He got out, started the slow process of filling the tank. The Ford Fusion pulled in and parked in a spot facing the convenience store, giving the driver a clear view of Jace. The man got out of the car. He locked it with a chirp of his remote and walked into the store. He wasn't in a hurry. He was being patient. He was waiting for Jace to go to the restroom, to get back in his car, to present a clean, quiet opportunity. Jace didn't wait. He stopped the pump, screwed the gas cap back on, and walked, not toward the store, but toward the gray Ford Fusion. He moved casually, a guy looking for the restroom. He had the silenced Smith & Wesson tucked in the small of his back. The Fusion was locked. Of course it was. Professionals locked their doors. But Jace had seen the man get out. He hadn't been paying attention to Jace. He'd been paying attention to his objective. Jace had been the objective. Jace walked around to the passenger side, away from the main lights of the store. He took a small piece of ceramic from his pocket, the tip of a broken spark plug he'd kept for just this purpose, and pressed it against the corner of the passenger window. With a sharp tap, the window crazed into 1,000 tiny cubes and collapsed inward with a soft, granular sigh. The car alarm chirped once, then went silent as Jace reached in and unlocked the doors. He slipped into the back seat and lay down on the floor, pulling a discarded jacket over himself. He was invisible. He waited. 3 minutes later, the driver's door opened. The man got in, a large cup of coffee in his hand. He set the coffee in the cup holder. He started the engine. He looked over at the gas pump, where the Taurus was still parked. He was waiting for Jace to come out of the store. He settled in, took a sip of his coffee. Jace rose up from the back seat like a bad dream. The man saw the movement in the rearview mirror. His eyes went wide. He started to turn, to react, his hand dropping from the steering wheel, probably reaching for a weapon under the seat or in the door panel. He was fast. But he wasn't fast enough. Jace put the muzzle of the silenced pistol against the back of the man's head and pulled the trigger. Twice. The sound was a dull, wet cough. The man's head jerked forward, hitting the steering wheel. The horn blared for a second, then went silent. He slumped forward, his coffee spilling into his lap. It was over. Jace didn't move. He sat there, listening. The sounds of the truck stop continued, oblivious. No one had seen. No one had heard. He wiped down everything he had touched, opened the back door, and slipped out. He walked calmly, not too fast, back to his own car. He got in, started it, and drove away, back onto the interstate, heading north. He was alive. He had the money, Lila still had it, safe. He had won the battle. But as the sun came up over the flat, empty horizon, painting the sky a dirty orange, he knew the war had just begun. They would send another man. A better one. And then another. He was a loose end they would never stop trying to snip. He couldn't go back to Humboldt. He couldn't stay in California. He was a ghost with a gym bag full of cash, hunted by men with no faces and no names. The road stretched out in front of him, a long, empty ribbon leading east toward the mountains of Colorado, toward a new state, a new name, and a new set of problems. The game wasn't over. It had just gotten bigger.